Hello and welcome to Radio Free Nintendo. It is June 20th, 2024, and I am your host, James Jones. I'm joined today by Mr. Greg Lay.
Ahoy, hoy, everyone.
Mr. Guillaume Vayette.
Hello, hello.
Welcome back, Guillaume.
Thank you.
It's
good to be
Mr.
back.
John. And Mr.
Sure.
John Lindemann. Yes. There's no time.
As ever.
There's no time.
Right.
It's great to be back.
Look,
All right, I'm out.
we're still... It's Skype. It's still Skype. We still have the delay. It's unavoidable. But John Lindemann is also here, already criticizing me.
I'm just saying this is
I don't
another...
think it's the delay. I think I'm just very bad at this still.
Yeah.
It's only
It's
been
fine.
600 episodes, but
It's
whatever.
fine. It's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Somebody commented that this might actually be the halfway point now of since I've taken over as host, which is haunting. This is episode 880. God damn it. Now you've thrown me off. And if you are living under a rock or have simply failed to heed Nintendo's 6-hour head start notice, Tuesday was the Nintendo Direct for June of 2024. So we had talked about this last week when we leaked the contents of the Direct. If you go back and listen, you will hear that we were 100% correct because, of course, we were leaking them. You obviously don't have to go back and confirm because, like I said, we were correct. And since you've seen the news now, it would just be a boring repetition of what's already in. You can go see our Horace Show Pony introduction, which I would point out that the AI overviews is back for Horace Show Pony. It returned for some reason. It was gone for a couple days. And now it's specifically mentioning explicit episodes of Radio Free Nintendo when you ask, which is very funny. It just perfect. No concerns, no worries. It's still very wrong. Oh no, it's been updated again. Boys.
It's
Now
evolving.
now the Seymour doesn't mention an RFN episode anymore.
Aw.
The Seymour. The intro is just Horace Show Pony's a character in Nintendo Switch game Everybody 1-2 Warriors. He's the game's master of ceremonies, described as a demigod and a cursed total with an astral and equine plane of being. That stayed the same. But the show more now says, in the game, the player receives an invitation to see a new Nintendo game and may be able to break out as an influencer with a small subscriber base. It just gets better. So
It keeps eating itself.
it is. So thumbs up yet again. I just keep telling it this is a good overview because it is. That's your Horace Show Pony AI Overviews update of the week. Brought to you by Google AI Overviews. Remember, every mistake you've made in your career, nowhere near as bad as the person who made this. AI Overviews, that's its best use. We're going to talk about the Direct. We're going to focus on the things we're interested in. We're not going to do the big full rundown because there are 36. John very helpfully put together a list of all of them, both in display order and in chronological release order. And for reference, Nintendo was very brisk about it, which is what we're trying to be as well. They did about as many segments as Microsoft did in their segment in their presentation in 1/3 the time. 42 minutes versus 2 goddamned hours. It felt very fast. I watched it again today, front to back, and it seemed like it was over as soon as it began, which is great. I like that. After Summer Games Fest torture sessions, this felt awesome. Yes, let's just get right down to it with the biggest thing that got announced, and that is everybody shut the fuck up. We're going to talk about Ace Attorney Investigations Collection. That's what we're going to talk about first. It's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening. I dared to dream, and now it is here. We are going to get Ace Attorney Investigations 2 translated into English. And they could have just kind of left it at that and been enough, but they actually went and redid the art. They've included a bunch of various versions of music. They had recorded the music for these two games in a symphonic session back in 2017 and released it as an album because Japan, I guess, question mark.
And it's getting a physical release.
Yeah, which the one of them didn't, two of them didn't. This is very weird.
Right?
Yeah. Capcom, what are you doing? If you've never played the Ace Attorney Investigations games, they star Edgeworth. They were spin-offs created that was in the era of try to use every feature on the DS possible. So I'm very curious how they've adapted it. We got the first one, and we did not get the second because the first one sold like hot piles of garbage. Capcom was very frank about it. Look, That game sold real bad. We think this one will sell worse. It's going to be really expensive. It just doesn't make economic sense. Did I accept that at the time? No. Did I accept that now? No. But we have it now in English. Now, there was a very good fan translation with a DS patch that they actually did a pretty good job localizing characters that didn't exist in the first game, so they had to make them up. Obviously, Capcom had a choice. Are they going to use anything from that localization? They've opted to basically not even consult it. So these characters will get official names that will not be the ones that people have gotten used to since that translation came out like 10 years ago. But people seem to be taking that pretty well. There's always that thing of people are going to be weird about it, but no, they seem to be fine with it. But yeah, a lot of work's going into this collection too, besides just translating a game that's never been translated. They recorded all new voice for the characters, because there are voiced components. Like I said, they redid all the art, but they're also including the classic art if you're some kind of weird fucking pervert who wants to see big pixels. They've put an art book in, which a lot of the Ace Attorney collections have had that. And a music gallery that has both the DS style music and this symphonic recording stuff. This is a big ass collection, and I've said this when I talked about Ace Attorney Investigations too, back when I played the translation. I think I've said it a few times since then. The first game's okay. It's okay. This is the first game that the current crew that writes Ace Attorney wrote. Not the great Ace Attorney stuff. That's Shu Takumi. This was sort of the handing off point to the other Ace Attorney team that got stood up once Takumi stepped away from the project to go make things like Ghost Trick. And so the first one's fine. I think they kill a president. It's a lot. But the second one's really good. The second one is a shockingly good story that really fucking goes places.
Because the Great Ace Attorney, loved it. It was really long. It was really complicated, but ultimately, it was worth it. I think I reached my I tried to play Spirit of Justice.
Yeah,
and that one kind of broke me. It was so freaking dumb.
It's Spirit of Justice suffers from an interesting problem that came out of a localization decision made with the very first Ace Attorney game.
Yeah, but there was also the fact that, at a certain point, you would think that Phoenix Wright earned a little bit of respect, and I guess, it kind of... I couldn't suspend my disbelief on that one. That this weird medium prosecutor who was wrong all the time would still have people eating in the palm of his hand. But then I'm reminded of reality. Let me
introduce you to cults.
Yeah, I know.
Effectively, she was running. I mean, she wasn't running it, but effectively, she was the tool of a cult.
Right.
And so, yeah, it just happened to be the cult controlled an entire nation, which sucks. But, it was a lot because there is that weird need to keep ratcheting up the insanity of the Ace Attorney franchise. And we've really hit a point where there's an entire country governed by spirit divination. It's like, what? This not Tibet that they have created.
Right. This one medium who's getting her own Minority Reports.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. Yeah. And so this is before the need to ratchet all this shit up. Because I remember when Apollo Justice came out, and people are like, "This is too fucking weird, and it's gone too far." Because the whole premise of Apollo Justice is very stupid. It seems like high literature compared to the absolute insanity of Spirit of Justice.
Yeah. So you're saying that these investigation games, the first one's okay, the second one's really good? Is that team though?
It is. But so the thing about these are they're more like point and click adventures. Mm-hmm. So you actually control Edgeworth as he moves around. There's no court segments. They have these logic deductions that sort of do the job of the court segment. It's really just a different way of doing the investigation than sort of a tap on all the things stuff. And then as you talk to people, you'll have the little logic battles with them that you would normally have while they're on the stand. So they're interspersed more throughout the gameplay rather than it being big chunks of one, big chunks of the other. And that works out really nicely. And I'm not going to say the plot's grounded. It is abso-fucking-lutely not grounded. It is not grounded in the slightest. It is complete. I mean, Edgeworth's assistant, his Maya, is a teenage professional thief. And he is very upset about the fact her profession is a thief. And is consistently reminded how much he dislikes it. But yet continues to rely on her to do it. So, it is what it is. But the second one's plot is wild. And I think it actually ended up setting up some of the stuff in the first 3DS game. A little bit. The Law Academy. But this is cool. This is like straight down the middle, like, this is a game for James, I see. I have not pre-ordered it yet. I will pre-order it before it comes out because there is a pre-order bonus, but we might be pre-ordering it like it comes out on one day. I pre-order it the day before just to get the pre-order bonus. Just as a ethical, I'm not going to pre-order a digital product. You can't make me. But yeah, this was unexpected and greatly appreciated.
I agree.
All right, who else has a game they want to talk about?
Well, I suppose we may as well go with one of the thing that's kicked off the presentation, which I feel like was quite a surprise, at least to me.
Yeah.
Which was the new Mario and Luigi Brothership. Now, the thing about this, I mean, we've talked about things, last week that could be here in this direct, to help fill out, the kind of slots in the release schedule that were left after Luigi's Mansion and NES World Championships, which of course did get mentioned, but they didn't. I mean, as you said, they didn't dwell on anything, but they especially didn't dwell on those. It was pretty quick. So it's like, okay, what could fill those things out? And I don't think I would have even thought about a Mario and Luigi remake. No. After, what the kind of the fact that you had a couple of those remakes at the back end of 3DS and, just the whole circumstance.
They've been remade.
Those games have been remade, and with Alpha Dream ceasing to be as a company, the developers of those games and the remakes, and just also the fact that we've last year in November we had the Super Mario RPG remake, and last month we had the Paper Mario 1000-Year Door remake. So another remake, but this time for the Mario and Luigi sort of third branch of Mario RPG history, wouldn't have seemed very likely, but an original title is not that likely either, I wouldn't have thought, because obviously you could see you're talking about one of the things that made those remakes possible on 3DS really was just like, we've got a lot of this kind of very nice pixel art done for the characters in the previous game, because they'd already made Dream Team and Paper Jam, so they had a lot of stuff that they could use for that, and the fact that the scenarios were existing games from the DS GBA days, so like that was pretty something relatively cost effective kind of thing to spin up to fill out late era 3DS software lineups. This seems like a lot more work. I mean, when you have the trailer beginning, it was for me, it was very quickly identifiable as Mario and Luigi because they do have that slightly modified character design with the kind of solid black eyes and the slightly more kind of comic book color look to them. And straight away it was like, okay. I mean, I think we might be at a bit of a risk of Mario RPG kind of overload here. I mean, it's a lot. Even though this one is original, that's the thing. I mean, whereas the other two, while they are celebrated games, and I think a lot of people were very happy to see them come back, they weren't. So, in many ways, I feel like this, I don't know, it's a risk of getting overlooked when, it would be a real shame for the actual new game in a Mario RPG sub-series to be the one that people just kind of gloss over.
It's. Have they said who's making it?
No, they did not.
They're not very candid about that sort of thing these days.
No, we got an email about it, but it's like in this case, like this is, this was Alpha Dream.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about this a little bit last week with the Kirby sort of thing, which that was one of the things I think was a slightly surprised not to see filling out some kind of Kirby product. But we talked about the fact that Vanpool have been a Kirby kind of support studio for the last so many years, and they have shut up shop. And with Alpha Dream, it's the similar thing. We don't know that's it. What we've seen recently is that Nintendo really, they will very much keep their kind of cards close to the chest on this sort of stuff. And I think in the case of the Donkey Kong Returns HD version, somehow it's already kind of emerged that that's Forever Entertainment. It feels like a long time ago that we had that story about that Nintendo had like financed them in some fashion for some sort of partnership, and wondering about what sort of project they could possibly be on. If we know things at this sort of juncture these days, it's because of stuff like that, where it kind of people are able to deduce it, or something kind of leaks out. Nintendo really seem to have gone very quiet about this sort of thing these days, which I'm sure they have their reasons, but it doesn't sit very well.
I wonder if they did if they pulled a ND Cube, where it's like, oh, the company that makes our very profitable Mario Party team is gone. Well, why don't we just in-house some of the people that were there?
Yeah, so
and just have
seems,
them make it.
That seems plausible enough. I mean, also you've had stuff in the past, haven't you? Like, Artoon went down, but then like our Zest emerged in its place and picked back up doing very much the same things in collaborations with Nintendo, with making Yoshi's New Island after Artoon had done Yoshi's Island DS. So perhaps it could be something similar to that, but we probably won't be hearing anything about it from Nintendo anytime soon.
Yeah, it's very curious, because those games do have their own tone that I would be curious. I mean, obviously Nintendo was involved in all those games' creation, but how much did they who was the originator of the tone of those games, and how much is it going to be present in? I mean, it seems like it's there from a very quick trailer we got, but that was all we got. We got a trailer, and then we got that was Mario and Luigi Brothership, the first new RPG in 9 years. And then, that was it. That was the end of the segment. Because, like I said, everything was very, very brisk.
No, it's true. And, you could just see some of the kind of trademarks of the series. Again, that more kind of, the cel-shaded kind of look, like that kind of more comic book kind of style that some of the games had more than others. In particular, like, I think Bowser's Inside Story had quite a, kind of... Mm-hmm. The strong aesthetic in that regard. Then it went to a more of a softer shaded look when it got to 3DS. But I guess the other thing is that maybe you could take from it is they were more kind of seemingly like different characters around, like this whole sort of thing about these pun-based characters around electrical outlets.
Yes.
For whatever reason, because it's worth mentioning, of course, because this is something that's come up with Paper Mario over the years about they just started kind of using the stock characters of the sort of Mario world more, and of course that did sneak into Mario and Luigi because of Paper Jam when they crossed them over. Right,
yes.
So that had a lot of the same stuff going on with there's just lots of toads or whatever. So it does kind of suggest it might be more like the games that preceded Paper Jam in that respect.
This is a November game.
It's very like Mario RPG was November last year, right? So it kind of feels like a for like replacement in that way.
November 7th. So it's really not that far off. All things considered, from announcement to release. But yeah, all we got is about 2 sentences worth of content.
Yeah. I mean, again, we talked about it. They had a lot of stuff to get through. They weren't going to dwell on anything, even if it was, on the one hand, stuff that's coming out like Luigi's Mansion in a week. So and it's a game that already existed, so we all know what that is. Or it was something, that we had no idea existed before that day. They still they might slow down a little more. The trailer might be a little longer, or they might explain one or two things. But really, there seem to be a pretty clear imperative here to keep it moving as much as possible. Which, as you kind of already mentioned, in contrast to some of the other things that have been going on this month, welcome enough for me. And I mean, I think John last week said, was expecting it to be around 40 minutes. And it was. And I was like, oh, that could be on the longer side. But when you look at the fact that A, it was 40 minutes, but B, they didn't dwell on anything, it just shows you, I think, that it's certainly relative to my expectations anyway, they had more than I was expecting in this.
And they probably could have gone longer, because they had 36 segments and 42 minutes. And Shinya Takahashi probably got about 5 of them. So, like, they probably could have stretched this out a lot. And so, what that means is we're probably going to get a lot of directs, at least a couple more directs this year, where they deep dive on some of these games.
Yeah, I mean, as we said last week again, like Super Mario Brothers Wonder had like a very like direct-esque segment, like just kind of ripped out and put by itself, so you could see something like that when you get close to release for some of these things. And that's certainly more details are going to have to cover something, especially a new game like Brothership. But I'm excited to see what they could do with that style of game, with more lavish kind of presentation. Like I said, there was lots to like about the art and stuff in the previous games, but going a fully kind of polygonal presentation now. I mean, the music did get to a very high level on 3DS already, but presumably you can go, I would hope Shimomura is back, and that you can take it even further than it's been before.
Yeah, that would, if you're offering new Shimomura music, I'm very interested. We don't know that yet, but that would be the hope.
No, I mean, certainly what you could hear in the trailer was very much in keeping with the Mario and Luigi kind of style that we've grown accustomed to over the years, but I couldn't tell you anything definitively just from hearing that. I'm not nearly knowledgeable enough, and I know anybody could be entirely confident anyway, so we'll wait and see on that, but that could be a very appealing element.
Yeah. I have to admit, I have very little experience with the series, and I guess this might be the time to do something on it, because it broadly speaking did show up relatively late on systems they were on, with the exception of the DS one or the GBA ones. But I didn't have money at that point, so I didn't really have a chance to buy these things. Yeah, well,
with GBA, it in some ways I kind of know what you mean, but because it didn't feel like it at the time, but actually it wasn't far from the end.
Oh, you're right. That's true.
I didn't feel like we're in the twilight days of the GBA, but what we didn't know is that the third pillar was about to descend and just crush one of the other pillars completely underneath it, and then there'd be 2 again. That's true. But I mean, Partners in Time was relatively early. That was the one that was relatively early. But that is not. I mean, that wasn't one of my favourites. I think Superstar Saga and Bowser's Inside Story are generally held up as the highlights of the series, and those were the ones that got remade for 3DS very, very late,
extremely late. So. I assume there'll be a demo, which will help them get this out, because it has been a little while. And yeah, I'm interested in this one. Who's got another game they want to talk about?
Well, we got to touch on Romancing Saga 2, Revenge of the Seven, which is the second remake of Romancing Saga 2 that the Switch is getting.
Sure.
Not really. I guess like the first one, maybe not a remake, more of a port of like updated. It looked ugly. Basically, it looked like probably. I'm assuming there's an iPhone version of Romancing Saga 2. That's what they put on the Switch. Like there was this weird compromise that did the same with Romancing Saga 3, which I played through and I enjoyed, but I didn't think it looked very good.
I'm looking at it right now.
So 2 had this. Kind of this mix of chunky pixels and some stuff that was in higher resolution.
It looks like it's RPG Maker stuff.
Yeah, kind of. It looks like someone put in menus or text that's, like before the Final Fantasy, what is it called? Classics Collection? No.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Something
like the remastered ones, before
Pixel
they
remasters.
Yeah, the
Pixel
pixel
remasters. Thank you.
Yes.
Like before they fixed the menu font, basically. The
Yes.
Yeah. So
And that's still $25, by the way.
the Romancing Saga 2?
Yeah.
Okay. It's often been on sale. I own
Sure.
it. I tried to play it. I didn't get very far. I liked 3 a whole lot more right from the start. But the
That value proposition is going to look a lot worse when this
Yeah.
remake comes out.
yeah, for sure. Because so this remake, of course, completely new graphics. It's actually a remake. They're adding voices, which is probably a minus considering the voices
it's a 3D game. Like that's the biggest change.
Yeah, that is the biggest change visually, but I would say that the biggest change is the added difficulty settings and stuff, and that seems huge. I think that the hard difficulty is the original difficulty. You've got the normal difficulty for RPG fans who want a balanced game, so that tells you how balanced the original game was. And then you've got the easy difficulty for people who don't want to deal with SaGa shit in their SaGa game. So there's something for everyone here. That to me, that's the biggest thing. But yes, it looks much better.
I mean, it looks like a modern game now.
Yeah.
Now, I would say if you don't want to deal with SaGa shit in your SaGa game, there is always SaGa Emerald Beyond, which literally just came out.
Yeah, but I don't know. Did that get? I kind of stopped paying attention after,
I don't
you
know.
gave your impressions of the demo.
You should go play the Switch demo. You should just go have that experience.
Yeah.
I recommend everyone go play that Switch demo. It's madness.
But it
Now,
doesn't sound like the the SaGa games that I know. Like you were chasing cats or something. I was like, whoa.
I think there
What are
is
we
some
doing?
of that in other, like some of the more SaGa-y stuff in there. I mean, I think the issue is that I would say everyone's favorite creator, Kawazu, has no editor and just went completely apeshit when he made this game.
It looks like they can't just release anything they want, Like Romancing Saga 2 and 3 had this kind of iPhone-y, report to the Switch. Then we got the first Romancing Saga, which is a Minstrel Song remastered or whatever it's called. It's not the original Romancing Saga, it's the PlayStation 2 remake.
Yes.
Updated for today. And then now we have Romancing Saga 2, an actually modern game. Of course, yeah, Emerald Beyond and the one before that, Scarlet Grace. That was a PS Vita. Anyway, one of those.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the lesson is that Akitoshi Kawazu has dirt on somebody.
Yeah, probably.
Or it's Square Enix just doesn't care to such a degree that stuff just happens and they look over like, who approved him spending $40 million on a Saga 2 remake? God damn it.
Yeah,
All
so
right.
I'm actually looking forward to it. I'm gonna play that version because the one I have is kind of unplayable unless you look at an FAQ, and the FAQ is not gonna be like, oh, you go there and do this. You're gonna have to study the FAQ because it's gonna try to explain to you how what's his name, Kawazu? How his mind works.
Every game is a descent into Kawazu's personal psychology.
Yeah, it's something.
The sad part is I know exactly what Guillaume's talking about because I tried to play this emulated at some point, and I was like, "What the fuck is this game?"
No, it's the opacity is the point. It seems.
Yeah, to a certain degree, that does seem to be the case. He knows what he's doing, and he thinks it's very funny, and he's usually wrong. But at the same time, it is very funny, from a 10,000-foot view. It's not very funny when you're holding the controller.
Look, there are SaGa sickos. Sorry, there are SaGa sickos out there.
Oh, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
No, actually, this one looks really good. In a weird way, they showed the main character moving through the castle. it kind of reminded me a little bit of what they've done with Fire Emblem,
Mm-hmm.
where you could just kind of wander around between missions.
Yeah. I'm hopeful.
Yeah, no, I'm very interested in it, but I do have to figure out if Kawazu had an editor before I decide if I'm going to buy it or not. Was there someone going, no, you can't do that? No, you can't do that either. No, absolutely not. John, you haven't dropped this one. Give me a selection.
I mean, Metroid Prime 4 Beyond.
You're just jumping straight to the one more thing.
If you want me to know if you want me to tell you what I'm interested in.
That's fine. That's it. It's fine. I was curious who was going to pull that lever.
Yeah, I mean, and it looks very much like a new Metroid Prime game that is using the Metroid Prime remake engine.
Yeah. So like there are other games in this. I guess like I don't have to be coy. Like it's not like we're spoiling anything. The new Zelda game is very novel. Like it's very
we'll
Nintendo doing something that like fans think they want one thing, and Nintendo does something completely different. But Metroid Prime 4 seems like we're doing what the fans want. We're making a Metroid Prime game.
We've been making this game for almost a decade, and we just decided, fuck it, let's just make another one.
Yeah.
Yep. It's almost like they just wanted Retro to prove that they could do something with the remake, and then they're like, okay, fine, just reuse that engine, thanks.
Just finish the project, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I've seen some comments online on Blue Sky, which I guess is now my social media of choice. Seen some people saying like, wasn't that trailer weird? Like it's
it was highly edited.
And like space battles and like. Anyway, like the whole thing to me just looked like the opening area that you're not actually going to be doing Metroid things in. It's the area where Samus still has her morph ball and her missiles.
Yep.
And soon after that sequence, she's going to lose them. Yep. And then I'm assuming the big area at the end of the teaser with like the Yggdrasil showing up in the distance. I'm assuming that's the actual Metroid game that we're getting.
I think that took exactly the same thing. I mean, it seemed so kind of. The trailer was almost sort of seeming like pains to like reassure you, just give you like the most. And again, you, especially for older gentlemen that talk about this stuff pretty consistently, we can overestimate how much is retained by people out there of a series that hasn't had an actual new game since 2007.
It's been a long time.
But it did seem at pains to reassure of like just like the Metroid Prime kind of the images and features that are just the most typical of it, right? It's just
there was like one bit that it was almost funny. Like it was like we're playing all the hits, like this part of the like a big pipe or something just like crashes in front of you, and like it's kind of it's in gameplay, but it's happening in real time, but also it's kind of a cutscene, right? And then what do you see? You see a crushed space pirate. Is Samus gonna scan him? Damn right, she's gonna scan him.
No, exactly. It's like we've got the gunship, which is pretty much the one from 3, I think. Then she's in her kind of various suit, very much like the one that's in 2 and 3. We have the familiar sort of choral version of the fanfare as we go into first person. Although it was an enhanced version of that, I must say. I think it felt like it was, like actual choir rather than synth choir. But just like hit on all those things that will make people remember the way Metroid Prime was. For those whose memories might have dimmed a bit and didn't play the remaster recently or whatever, and as Guillaume said, I mean, it's really similar to that first bit, especially. I mean, yet somewhat like the very first one with the pirate frigate, but I think more so the third game has like the opening with the space pirates attacking a facility and stuff. I mean,
she arrives mid-fighting.
It's really damn similar to that, wasn't it? So, like, it was just, it hit you with a bunch of familiar imagery that, as John said, you're looking at the kind of the lighting and the aesthetic, it's reminding you of the way that they kind of enhance things in Metroid Prime Remastered. So yeah, just kind of like solid kind of box checking type of stuff. And then the tease of something more
the music changed
significantly different. It was like very, very quick. But again, because this was one of the few things, especially from Nintendo themselves, that was for 2025, this has got more, and who knows when,
just broadly 2025.
Yeah, exactly. Like they've got a long time to kind of tease this out. This really is just it's almost like the re-announcement of it, let's be fair. Right. Because of the silliness of how it was announced in the first place.
I mean, this has to come out day one with the new console. I
don't know. Why? So look, just because it's going to be on Switch doesn't mean it has to be a launch. Like, if it's not ready when the console launches, they might have another game for the console launch, and maybe this one comes out in the second wave of games. Like, it's just going to depend on when it's ready. At this point, you may as well finish the fucking thing. Take your time. Just like if it's not ready, it's not ready. Put something else out. I don't know. Fuck it. Like, there's going to be more than just Metroid, because I hate to say this to Metroid fans, but Metroid ain't a system mover. It has no history of being a system mover.
I don't know why. I mean, who knows how
because
done
you have a Mario game ready. That's why you don't put Metroid out.
I mean, who knows how done this game is, but it doesn't make any sense to not put it out at least with the new console. Like
I said, because you have a Mario game that's ready. That's why.
Yeah, I guess you're saying an unannounced Mario game is what you mean.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see if it is. Yes. Sometimes you can think you're going to have that ready, but it isn't. I mean, there's a lot of things that are going to be fluid about that, but it may be the case that would be the best case scenario for Metroid Prime 4, because just try and generate some buzz around it, where it's like, okay, this thing that was talked about for so many years, it's finally happening, and kind of tie that into a console launch. That might be the best way that you could get give it a chance to kind of cross over, or just at least expand a bit on where it's been in terms of popularity. But I mean, look, all of this is just so kind of off kilter, none of this should be happening the way that it has, right? It's only because of weirdness and bungling that any of this is happening.
I mean, I will miss the 4.
Yes, I mean, it's got a whole logo now and a subtitle and everything. The 4 is
kind of a shitty logo,
a depressingly small percentage of the logo now. But I mean, I look, as much as it spent time over all these years saying about how it was just a mistake and all that, about how they announced a game that they were nowhere near it being to the point of legitimate kind of viability, because they were doing damage limitations on a previous mistake with Federation Force, and how that was revealed and marketed and everything. There is potentially an upside to it for people who care about Metroid Prime, which is that, for all we know, if they had kind of initiated behind the scenes development on Metroid Prime 4, but not, as they normally would, announce it until it got further along, that product may well have been cancelled and never rebooted, and we never would have known about it. It just would. Oh yeah. The fact that they did publicly announce it and commit to it meant that they had more of an obligation once that first attempt,
Metroid Prime 4 Albatross,
when that first attempt ran aground, to say, okay, well, we're still kind of on the hook for this, so let's actually, rather than what would probably, I can only assume, be the economic decision, to say, it's cooked, it's done, and it happens. There's loads of games that this happens to, right? But they instead have to say, no, we've got an obligation. Let's go circle back around with Retro and see if we can take another crack at it. So I mean, we may well be getting this game at all just because of their PR mismanagement. So as much as you can make fun of it and you know all that. Like it may be that there will be something good to come out of it, because it's pretty difficult to imagine that they're gonna, you know, it's gonna be worthwhile from the amount of like time and money spent on it at the end of it. Even if it's relatively successful, it won't,
Right.
You know, because
the ROI won't be there.
Well, with Nintendo especially, that wonderful phrase and concept, opportunity cost, always has to be considered, right? Because if they had spent that time and money on something else, it could have sold a shitload of units, because we've been living in this time where the Switch is really successful and Luigi's Mansion selling over 10 million. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like
you could have put that a fraction probably of what they've been messing around with, you know, trying to get something right with this. And they may well have created something that could have generated significantly greater profits than this. So, you know, as much as I've made fun of their problems in this regard, if assuming hopefully that at the end of all this, Retro have created a fine return for the Metroid Prime sub-series, you know, I personally should be grateful to them for their failure.
It is I take no pleasure in saying this, but Mario Party Jamboree will make more money for Nintendo than this game.
Well, they're putting that in the big slot. I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, obviously, look, this is one of the things that kind of lets you know the difference between this year and last year, the truth of what we've been saying, you know, that's just self-evident for a while, of how, you know, Super Mario Brothers Wonder was kind of the mic drop for the A-teams on Switch.
Right.
Yeah, now there's a Mario Party in that October slot that's, you know, rather than...
But Mario Party games just fucking sell,
but
so
again,
like, I kind of get it.
We talked about it last week, because this one is Super Mario Party Jamboree.
Right.
Again, Super Mario Party, the first of the Mario Party games on Switch, is one of the biggest sellers on the system. So why not? Why wouldn't you have a game?
And it looks huge. So, like, I get it. I did want to say one more thing about Metroid, but then we can transition over to Super Mario Party. Well, two. One, the trailer feels very abrupt, because it's obviously, and to go with y'all saying it was the opening segment, it was very obviously cutting out tutorials for motion and stuff. So, like, it was, Samus would start walking down a hall, or if she got off the ship, it cut away almost immediately, because that was probably where it was going to tutorialize some motion stuff. Then it gets into cuts to a combat sequence, and then it cuts away again, because probably it was tutorial stuff, and then we see the scanning, and it moves you through. This game feels like it's very early. They could not put together a full
This
sequence.
is the thing. I just looked, and that announcement about the Metroid Prime 4 development update, that was in January of 2019.
Yes, it was.
The remake of Metroid Prime came out, 4 years later? It came out in February 2023.
Yep.
So 4 years sounds like a pretty robust development cycle for that remake, right? Where they probably built that engine. So this thing, Metroid Prime 4, it has to be nearing completion, regardless of what they showed there. It has to be.
Well, look, I mean,
I don't think it's going to be 3 years off.
No, it's
right?
2025.
I mean that.
I mean,
I'm just saying, I don't think it's going to slip past 2025. I don't. That's why I'm saying. That's why I'm saying it's going to come out with the console, because I can't see it being.
But you don't know when the console's going to come out.
We don't know when the console's going to be.
It has to come out in March.
It doesn't.
It has to come out in March, man.
To reiterate for the listeners, the only thing Nintendo has said is that there will be an announcement of the new console before the end of the fiscal year. Not that the console itself will make it within that time frame. Now, I don't necessarily disagree with you, John, but those are the facts as we understand them.
Nintendo's still making quite a significant amount of money. They don't have to pull the trigger right now.
Yeah.
They're
equally,
they're not going to let it die on the vine either.
Yeah, no. Because I mean, we've talked about this many times. They have made mistakes before on waiting too long. So I think definitely Wii and DS both suffered in that. They just seem to expect. For various reasons, those consoles to kind of keep going in a healthy environment for longer than they did, and then they were kind of rushing the successors, and then that had its own problems and stuff. Now, seems like Switch is just in a healthier state than that. But I guess you never know how those things are going to change and stuff. So it's just at this point we're only guessing, and that's the only thing we've got that's concrete is that we will have that announcement before the end of March.
Maybe the console comes out in June and Metroid comes out in September or something like that. But man, that just seems like.
But I think it was very telling that it was quite clear the segment that they wanted to show was the intro, and they cut a bunch of tutorial stuff out of it.
And really, I was actually surprised at the number of games in this that were 2025. I thought that was weird.
No,
from
Nintendo, the only other one was the DK Returns,
which is right at the start of the year.
Yeah, it's just barely in 25. The other stuff was third party things, and that's I was expecting a very concentrated focus, so it did sort of sprawl a little bit further out, especially with those. Well,
that's what they said. They said it was going to be 2024. So
that's exactly that. Some of it is just what they kind of told us to expect. Exactly. So they did that again. It goes back to the sort of theme that there was that little bit more, but that's part of the expectations management game, isn't it? They did the right thing, kind of reining things in with being explicit about the successor, and then you talk about the time frame and stuff, and then you end up in a situation where people feel like you over delivered a bit. That's doing it right.
The other thing I wanted to point out is, can we talk about the fact that Samus might be the most vain person in existence? Because, Super Mario Face Ship, that wasn't his choice. That was given to him. Samus deliberately went out and said, no, I want the ship to be my fucking face. And then,
Maybe she just buys it from, wherever she can, and, she likes the brand, and just, you'd be surprised what the iPhone car was going to look like. The Apple car.
Yeah, that is
exactly like one of those puck.
It was going to look like a boondoggle that cost $140,000.
That is kind of something that came up with the with Prime 3, I think, right?
It did. Yes.
In Prime 2, she has basically the ship from Super Metroid, which is not quite as much like this is just Samus's helmet with a ship attached. Whereas, and the weird thing about that is a Metroid Prime 3 still meant to be set before Super Metroid? So it kind of felt like Prime 2 was like, see, we're getting towards Super Metroid because now she's got a ship that's, more consistent.
Then she got a ship that's less.
But then she's like, no, screw that.
Fashion is cyclical,
Yeah, apparently so.
It's like, imagine if you drove so now this goes back to my Super Mario the Kart idea, where it's just everybody's been turned into giant heads on wheels.
Yeah.
But imagine if you showed up to a party or to your job. Let's say you showed up to work in a car that was just your fucking head. Everyone would think you're the biggest asshole in the world, and they'd be right.
If you're familiar, you remember that Stephen King. Feel like James has mentioned this at some point. The Stephen King film that he actually directed, Maximum Overdrive.
Supposedly,
apparently on a lot of substances at the same time.
Yeah.
Does this mean that potentially when it wasn't taken over by a comet or whatever, and the truck started driving itself, that was actually driven by the Green Goblin?
Possibly.
It's like, you know what? I'm done with this glider. It's too dangerous. I'm going to drive a truck for a while, but it's still going to have my face on the front of it.
It's. You're right. It's the same, more or less the same craft in Metroid Prime 3, but there's something about how, maybe because it's the higher fidelity, maybe it was just that shot they used of her where it's like you see the ship land and then you just see her head and they're basically right next to each other, where it's like, man, have just a little bit of self-awareness.
I do like the idea of somebody looking at, and again, we shouldn't discount this possibility considering, how long it's been since there was an original game, although, yes, Prime Remastered came out last year. But, somebody looking at those images out of context when that ship lands and then Samus emerges in it and then going, well, I guess who else could have been flying that ship?
I don't know why
Very
you're so
funny for
bothered,
somebody
James.
else.
This is just what.
It just looks very stupid. It looks very stupid.
No, but this is what peak performance looks like. So you
No,
don't
it's
have to
not.
like it.
Samus routinely loses all of her shit. She's the opposite of peak performance. She's like to make things take as long as possible. Performance.
Well, peak performance is a fleeting thing with Samus. You have to build up to it over quite a long period with the knowledge, much like Sisyphus. It's going to roll back down the hill at some point.
Imagine if you went to work every day in your car that's got your face as its only visible attribute, and then got to your desk and smashed your computer every day. Like, I guess I got to assemble a new one today. That's what Samus does. She is the worst employee.
And I guess it was a little bit of a surprise. We talked about this last week. It was hardly a shock that they finished on Prime 4. I think it is the kind of splashiest, if not...
And probably the furthest out, too.
Yeah, it's the furthest out. It's the one that you can just do like a kind of a teasery type of thing, and really like that bit with the world tree at the end is kind of, I think, the first bit, which was most of it, is just like, it is Metroid Prime, it is back, and then the other bit is really like, okay, what does this mean, like for how different the game will be, in terms of, will you have more substantially open environments than you've seen in previous Metroid Prime games? And what does that, will that affect the experience? Like, that's the interesting part, but that is super fleeting. But you can do that. You can put that at the end and have it be, kind of tantalizing for a lot of people when it's been so long, and you've got plenty of months, presumably, to fill in the blanks and build that hype train before it comes out, whenever it does, in 2025. It's just, the other thing we talked about is, would you have a Prime 2 and 3 to kind of keep, because it's been more than a year since Prime remastered, could you have a Prime 2 and 3 as a collection, bit like Pikmin 1 and 2? Not at this time. Yeah. Now, it doesn't mean it won't happen. I think... Because, as we've already mentioned, we don't know when the Prime 4 is coming out. It may be quite some time. So you could still slip that in, at some point. I mean, let's face it, Pikmin 1 and 2 came out like the month before Pikmin 4, was it not?
Yeah, it was very close.
It was really close. So, even all the way up to, virtually launch day of Prime 4, whenever that is, I guess we couldn't rule it out. But then again, it doesn't have to happen at all. But it still seems like, apparently this is a very crucial issue of like, well, how come she's flying this different ship now? Well, Prime 3 doesn't really explain it, but I guess at least it's there. You could see that it's wasn't completely out of the blue.
Yeah, they're gonna need to do like this video of like, okay, let me catch you up on fucking everything. Okay, we're good. We got you there.
Including the crucial role of Psylux, who we did see.
Oh my god,
right.
NintendoWorldReport.com current site director Psylux. He's all over the goddamn website.
Is John Redden trying to kind of claim Psylux in a similar way to the way that you've claimed Show Pony as your own? Like,
I think his is more affectionate, where mine is significantly more mocking. Like, yeah, I have claimed Show Pony, but more as my own personal punchline, not so much like an object of affection. I think that there's a distinction there to be drawn.
But I mean, they have, for whatever reason, and I played Metroid Prime Hunters and liked it well enough, probably more than some people for sure. But I don't really remember terribly much distinctive about Psylux versus the others in that game. I mean, it was ages ago. Like, it was 06, so...
Shouldn't have let him steal that egg.
But they have been breadcrumbing it. Like, his ship was at the end of Corruption in 07, and then, Federation Force had a Psylux teaser in there, so they are honouring that, which is, it's a weird juxtaposition of, like, on the one hand, you've got all these images of just, like, the Metroid Prime fundamentals, basically, just, here's the through the visor view, here's the scanner, here's, Morph Ball rolling around in a vent or whatever, like, just core Metroid Prime stuff. And then it's like, oh, here's this thing that's mostly from a spin-off and in, like, teasers at the, like, after an ending, if you complete it on hard or something, like, or I forget what requirements they were, but that's the one aspect that's like, okay, well, that's very specific. That's for the people who've been holding out for what these breadcrumbs are going to lead to over all this time. They have started to deliver anyway. Congratulations.
It's finally among us. I guess we could talk a little bit about Mario Party. It's Super Mario Party Jamboree. It looks like it's giant. Like the stage they showed, the mall seemed huge. They showed a bunch of different new modes. They've implied there will be other new modes. There's this weird. They called it a race. It almost felt like basically you just play mini games and essentially do laps, and online it's like a 20-person online multiplayer thing. It does feel like this game is significantly more online than maybe even Super Mario Party, which did have online components and did have online gameplay. So maybe
I might be misremembering. But didn't they add a bunch of online stuff to that during the lockdowns of the early pandemic period?
Yes, because it wasn't online and we made fun of them. Correctly made fun of them. So hopefully we don't have to go through that phase this time. But every Mario Party game that comes out should be thought of as a in-person and online, as a dual-purpose game. This one's got a huge cast of characters. It just seems like it's got, I can't remember how many, 100-something games in it.
It's a jamboree, James.
It is a jamboree. It's a jamboree.
Yep.
So that will be. Look. Here's the thing: of the games they showed, that will probably make Nintendo the most money. Yeah. You can feel about that however you want, but
that's why it's in that October. We talked about it. That's the big slot now. That's
the economic reality is what it is.
And again, look at how much the Super Mario Party has sold. There's a reason why it's there, and the difference in terms of the kind of creative clout between that and Super Mario Brothers Wonder is pretty palpable. And I do say this as someone who's never really had anything more than a few dalliances with Mario Party. I've never really owned any or anything like that.
I've never played it sober, I can tell you that.
The point is that the disparity between that, how I feel is Super Mario Brothers Wonder is this major project that is their top developers making the first completely original side-scrolling Super Mario game for several years, versus another Mario Party. But commercially, the gap's not that big. It just isn't.
Yeah. But it's weird because my own experience with Mario Party is that everyone I was playing it with hated it. Then I look at ostensibly Mario Party fans who are playing it, and they seem to hate every minute of it. So
yeah, it is a we all suffer together experience, I think. But John, were you sober when we played it as part of 400?
No,
we had to play Mario Party 2 at Johnny's place.
No. Not even close.
Not even close. Okay. The video's out there if somebody wants to go test that theory.
Yep. I'm probably just very quiet, but I'm definitely not sober. Definitely not.
I the concept of a party game that's fun that could be played online has appeal. There is something about if we could do some fucking degeneracy in a party game online, it would be good.
Absolutely. Agreed.
But Mario Party historically has just been very much it's a slog, and the pace was always really slow. It does feel like they've made some progress on the pace, but the mini games just always felt bad. They were either the outcome is largely not determined by your skill, or the controls are whacked, or it just doesn't feel good. There'd be ones that's just Mario platforming. It's the Mario platforming minigame. It would feel bad. And it's this is a motherfucking Mario game. Why does the platforming feel bad? And the answer is, well, Nintendo didn't make it. Hudson did, or ND Cube did, or whatever the team that makes Mario Party is now. I think it's ND Cube.
So that's because every character has to feel the same, right? So they don't dare give any character their characteristic.
Even if they just felt like Mario, it would be better.
No, that's true. But that's a problem shared by the Mario Party games, all the RPGs. It's never except maybe or Paper Mario. I don't know. Like, but it never feels like Mario, right? Like, it's like when I tried to convince myself that Super Smash Brothers playing as Samus through the adventure mode and the GameCube version could perhaps feel like playing like a new Metroid game. Of course, it didn't. It feels off because it's not meant to be what it looks like.
I just like there is a part of me that's like, boy, if they made a good party game that you could play online and like we could play and just fuck around and be degenerates, that'd be great. But they're not gonna, because Mario Party makes a shitload of money and they're not gonna do anything that risks the golden goose. But this one looks like a lot of work went into. Like we talked down about Mario Party because I think we're all just conditioned to do it. It looks like a lot of work went into this game. This seems like a very involved project. So, you know, if they really did put the work in and they've ended up with something that's really good, then more power to them. Like, good job, you did it. But yeah, like they as Greg pointed out, they obviously think this game is immensely important. So, you know, we'll see. We'll see in October. Let's see. Do you want to talk about the N64 and Game Boy Advance stuff, or do you want to do something else?
Well, I guess we could have a quick note on that in terms of we're all there's no way you're going to get through a Nintendo Direct without something for Switch Online. I guess there's a couple of things that were interesting. First of all, it was not like previous sort of cycles, I guess you could say, with expansion pack stuff where they've had a big set of announcements of like, okay, here's a bunch of GBA games, and then that ends up getting like being the roadmap for like a whole year's worth of updates. Seems like they're not doing that anymore. They're just going to keep kind of
today's stuff,
trickling the games out, but like, you know, kind of keeping them under wraps for a bit longer. So that kind of maybe they figure like it's more impactful then, rather than like, oh well, we knew this was coming out one day and now this is the day. Like they just feel like that didn't create as much like pop as it could have done. In terms of the choice of the games that we did have here, a couple are pretty obvious, right? Metroid Zero Mission, we've been talking about that. It had to be. It was 20 years old this year. And then you've got with the Prime 4 announcement, okay, we haven't got a 2 and 3 collection or anything, but Zero Mission is something you can have for a bit of, you know, overlap, a bit of, you know, sort of complementarity, while, you know, Metroid's going to be kind of bubbling up in sort of the awareness of people. So yeah, that's a logical choice. The GBA version of Link to the Past with 4 swords, very similar, because there was a new Zelda game announced, so you could see that. Perfect Dark, right? Well, that's a little bit stranger, but it does continue the sequence of rare games that we've been seeing with Blast Core and Jet Force Gemini and so forth, and we all expected there would be more such things. But of course, in that case, you could look at the fact that the Perfect Dark sort of reboot thing that's had a tortured development.
It gave a sign of life in the Xbox presentation.
Exactly, yeah. It is actually, you know, similar to the Prime 4 thing. It is actually piggybacking off that a little bit, while there's this kind of mindshare, you know, spike for something because it's actually, there's been an update on it for the first time in a while. Oh, here's an older thing associated with that property. Turok is just random as fuck on it was
available
level. Because I did not expect to see it because the Night Dive port of the first game already exists. I don't know if it's on sale at this present moment, but it certainly has been many times since it first came out, and I don't think it's terribly expensive, you know, when it is. So it's if you have any interest in playing Turok at this point, that would seem to be a more desirable option, because, you know, those Night Dive ports of many first-person shooters from that time are good work, and certainly more, you know, suitable than the situation you get with NSO. I mean, where, you know, you can work around some of these issues with the button, you know, kind of custom button sort of bindings and things, but there's just the way the app handles it is not great in terms of just not having like customizable button layouts up front. And so, yeah, like I think Perfect Dark's got quite a lot of the same issues as GoldenEye did. So like if you already had kind of a setup worked out that worked for you with GoldenEye, that should still work with Perfect Dark. But then you've also got some of the weird technical stuff that it seems like there's some bugs with this one. Not a shock, because Perfect Dark was quite an advanced N64 game, coming as late as it did. I mean, the one thing that stuck out to me, just playing through the first 3 missions, was that, like the motion blur that they have on that for like getting dizzy. Which was, for whatever reason, was really a feature of which pretty much every N64 game I owned in the year 2000. Because it was in Perfect Dark, Sin and Punishment, and Majora's Mask. But
yes,
it does seem like it's like cranked up here for somehow in the emulation. It's just like too intense, like more intense than it. I don't know whether it's just a kind of illusion of the fact that this is what it looks like when it's at a higher resolution, because obviously it's 720 rather than 240 back in the day. But yeah, it doesn't look right. It looks like it's overdone, and that's certainly something I've seen substantially elsewhere.
Yeah, I saw a video. I don't know if someone was having fun. It was like faked or something, but like I saw someone kind of going around some sort of structure and trying to go fast, and literally like the screen became completely dark at some point, and it made the game crash.
Nice,
supposedly. So
I hope so.
Yeah, I mean they addressed some of these things with GoldenEye in updates to the N64 app. Like, some of it, the weirdness got better, but not like entirely. And I get that. That's just what's going to happen with these, sadly. So I mean, certainly. Like, even Ocarina of Time had quite a lot of bugs at first, when they first... But that was when they first launched the app at all, the service, the expansion pack service, so I guess there's that. But, I mean, that's, like, one of the core games in that launch, like, lineup of N64 games. And that had a bunch of issues, which I think they've mostly fixed, but... Yeah, I guess, it's cool that it's there to mess around with, at no extra cost if you're already an expansion pack subscriber. And I've got many fond memories of Perfect Dark. Of course, also now it's somewhat sullied by, John and I doing the sort of radio play reconstruction. Because as soon as that music on the first level kicked in, I was like, oh God, I can hear, because I had to edit myself.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And, editing my own voice for 3.5 years pretty much drove me more insane. But editing me trying to do Joanna Dark is like, no, it was not a good memory.
I like that you're protecting John from the criticism he so richly deserves for him doing that voice actor's bad impression of that voice actor's bad impression of Sean Connery.
It's a tough assignment, to be fair.
It's like now when I want to do that voice, I'm really just doing an impression of John's impression of that voice actor's impression of Sean Connery.
I would do the voice right now, but I don't do it for free anymore. It's you gotta pay. Gotta pay to play.
John, has gone full Joker. If you're good at something, never do it for free.
I'm glad you've just openly admitted to prostituting yourself. I'm glad we're.
Well, I think he's more openly admitting that what he does on this show the rest of the time is not good, because he definitely does it for free.
All right. Well, you know what? No, actually, for once, I agree with you. We're there.
Touche.
I like that. Just touche, John. He didn't speak during that entire exchange. Greg and I are both just like, we're having a duel. We're both just stabbing a third person. No, I'm going to get it in deeper. I'm going to get the sword in way deeper. Look at that. Look, I got it past the third rib. Look at that. It's just him saying Joanna lives in my head forever.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate. It is deeply unfortunate.
Don't bless that, Joanna.
James.
It worries me.
I love it. I made an exception there. You got to pay next time.
Greg just slid through 3 accents doing it.
He does. Awesome. He does. He's all over the place.
Man.
I recounted this story in the retroactive. A friend of mine's kid brother was like, the shock when he found out he was even meant to be Scottish. He couldn't
it goes weird.
it.
It goes weirdly Irish there in the middle of it.
It's not. Yeah, it's like sometimes it's Connery, sometimes it's like another, like a more ordinary Scottish person, but not an authentic one. It's wow. Yeah, but I mean, this was what they were doing at the time at Rare, this sort of silliness. But yeah, the other thing, of course, is that they and you could have predicted, it was obviously on the cards, but they had the separate app for the higher rated games now. That Japan already had.
That's just so stupid. Why not just bake in parental controls into the app?
I assume it's just cleaner this way, and
I guess
there isn't going to be that many games. But yeah, it does suggest that we might see more such, perhaps Turok 2 at some point. Conquers Bad
Evil.
Conquers
Bad.
It
might be like a requirement in some markets too. I mean, it's you can't sell. I think that there's a law here in Canada. You can't sell an M-rated game to minors. So, maybe there's something.
But you're not selling anything.
Yeah.
We kind of are, though. I mean, it's a service.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's an
you're not
access
selling the game. You're selling the service, and the service happens to have the thing in it.
But still, maybe, the SRB has a core. What's the actual company's name? Is that Zen Pinball? Or anyway, Pinball, Pinball Effects, whatever. They actually released, a platform called Pinball M for all the mature-rated tables.
How many mature-rated pinball tables are there?
They've started
Chucky, Alien.
They started a horror line, basically. So it's here's Texas Chainsaw, The Thing, and so Chucky, I think it's probably some of these things.
Where are my pornographic pinball tables? I mean, God,
I'm sure they do exist.
Yeah, they do. They're out there.
No, but I mean, the point is, there's probably a bunch of things that they considered doing before, but maybe that they didn't end up doing because it's then the whole app or collection of tables would have to be higher rated, and so eventually they've just spun it off into its own separate app that can be rated mature, and then you can actually use these ideas, and so it's not so very different. I mean, in Japan, Jet Force Gemini is in that higher rated.
Sure.
So
it just feels very six in one hand, half dozen in the other. Did you really accomplish anything? No. I don't know. It's whatever. It is what it is. I wish all of the stuff was in one app. All of the systems. It would make it so much easier. Because I would just permanently anchor it to my home screen and be done.
Sure, I just have a group for all the Switch Online apps.
Why can't I just tab through them at the top of the screen and go, okay, here's the NES, here's Super Nintendo, here's Game Boy, so I can go play Quest for Camelot whenever I want.
Mm-hmm.
Here's all of them. Just flip through them. Here's the Genesis one. I can skip that. They're just all there, and you don't. It just feels like it's a much better user experience. But whatever, Nintendo, whatever. Just do whatever dumb bullshit you're gonna do. And now we have this N64 rated M1 with the very hastily someone photoshopped rated M at the bottom of it.
I like it. I like it when the sort of the Super Mario 64 startup coin noise still plays, but now it's just got mature down the bottom.
Oh yeah,
it's a little bit of dissonance there.
Oh, good lord. Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D. It's real. We got to see a lot of it. We got to hear good music because the former composer isn't around anymore to insist we only get chiptunes. So people still pay to go to his godforsaken concerts. It looks really good. We got to see Yuji Horii, who talked about how much this game is exciting. And then they announced 1 and 2 because they're absolute goddamn sickos who just can't finish this project forever.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised how far away it still is. It's in November the 14th, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't know, and it looks good, but I felt like it looked weird. The proportions were off, and they were still they were showing off at some point a block pushing puzzle, and the movement was very much robotic. Anyway, it was very sudden, the block pushing. It didn't look like it was that was modernized, the animations and all of that.
Maybe not. I do think the gap between what HD 2D looked like at the Switch near the Switch's launch when we saw the very first game in it, and where it is now artistically, that they very much are less trying to do the 3D 2D sprite stuff. Like if you look at even what was the tactical game?
Triangle Strategy.
Yeah, if you look at Triangle Strategy, like they made all the textures look like they were Super Nintendo textures, just mapped to 3D models. This game very much does not look like that. Like the backgrounds look very fancy art, with the very high resolution and high detail screen meshes and screens.
Yeah, but I kind of feel like it looks like what I described Romancing Saga ports, as, but in 3D this time. So I don't know. I'm not fully sold on it, but I'm glad that it's.
I think it looked
I'm
nice.
glad it's finally got a release date.
Yeah, I think it looked nice, but I see what you mean when you say that. Like there is a little bit of a dissonance there. Now, the fact that they announced 1 and 2 in the end of the trailer, this game that they announced 3, like 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God! Please, Square Enix, please, just get a game out. Just get a game out.
It's been a long time, and of course, like there's Dragon Quest 11, which I don't know if I can spoil or not that I can actually spoil it because I kind of forgot what the ending is, because my whole point is I need to look up some dates, but Dragon Quest 11 first came out, of course, on the 3DS
and
the
PS4.
PS4, and then took its time to arrive on Switch, and then that was released like years ago. I don't really remember playing through that game all that well at this point, but I do remember at the very if you completed absolutely everything, if you went through the credits once, that was not everything. You needed to see them again. You needed to do more. There was like a whole 50 more hours of adventure after the first credits. So if you did everything, you realize that maybe 11 was tied in some way to the Erdrick trilogy as it's known, and specifically Dragon Quest 3. So I think that's a main reason why 3 is the first HG2D title that they decided to work on. I don't know if they expected it to take this long. I don't know. I expected it to come out really quickly.
Yeah. I thought when they announced it was probably close to done, but no.
And I guess and they sort of explain it as like, well, that is the I've never played these, but they with the section where so they didn't slow down for much, and even with Horace, like they didn't. It wasn't a long appearance on screen, but it did mention that 3 in the sort of chronology of the narrative comes first, right? So that it kind of makes sense for that one. And also that is like the real apex of 8-bit Dragon Quest mania, right? The third one. Mm-hmm. That's where the sort of cliches about that weren't somewhat semi-apocryphal, like the schools got shut down or whatever because everyone bunked off to queue up for Dragon Quest. Like it's the third one that kind of gave birth to a lot of that.
So 11 came out July 2017, and the Switch version came out 2019. So only 2 years later, but now we're 5 years away from that.
It's the other thing is, and then he mentioned it, is that 3 is essentially a prequel to 1 and 2. So that also probably factored into them dropping that one first.
Of course, that was kind of a surprise when you were actually playing 3, but now,
I guess it feels like everybody knows that now. I didn't, but thanks.
That's the thing.
Thanks,
maybe
Yuji
most of people outside Japan didn't. But
take you in your busy patterned shirts and stop spoiling my games.
Again, because it was so massive, the third game in Japan. It's just assumed that, right? Because everybody played it.
I mean, I guess I've done this talking about Lufia 2 before. So what can I say? But nobody's gonna play. Don't play Lufia 1. It's bad.
I can only assume that in Japan, like, the people just go, like, and utter, like, classic Dragon Quest 3 lines, like, it's nothing, just, like, people went around going, like, Luke, I am your father, over here.
People will walk up to you in the subway and just whisper Dragon Quest 3 lines in your ear. Yes, that is normal.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There's a correct, like, way to respond to that, from an, like, this is the right polite way to respond to someone giving you a Dragon Quest 3 line, but it depends on what line they give you, and I don't have time to go through them all right now. So
okay, I wasn't really comfortable with where I thought you were going.
You could just Google it. Well, you know what I'm not comfortable with? I'm having Donkey Kong jump out and scare children, but guess what? Donkey Kong Country Returns jumped out and jump scared me in the middle of this presentation, which is funny because we predicted it the week before.
Yeah, well, we broke down the possibilities, and that was, we literally said, like, this is the simplest one, which, you know, Occam's razor and all that, it should really have made it stick out as the likeliest one.
Yes.
And here we are.
Yep.
Now we can blow away to our heart's content.
It has the 3DS stages in it, which is good because I never got to play those.
Yeah, well, I think it was like, didn't you have to? They were quite a like deep unlock, as I seem to recall, because I did play the 3DS version and played all those, you know, kind of extra levels, but it's like one for each theme, you know, like each world theme, I think, and then, you know, maybe you've got to collect all the jigsaw pieces like in that level, you know, in that world to unlock that extra level from that world. It wasn't like just there, but by any means, you know, it was they've kind of buried those pretty deeply. But yeah, so it sounds like it'll be a pretty straightforward sort of thing. But you know, there's some good thing. It's nice in a way because Wii version, obviously, you know, I enjoyed the game a lot on the whole, but it did have the issue of like, okay, well, you know, you could either play with the nunchuck and the Wii remote, and therefore the character movement was with an analog stick, or you could play with the Wii remote by itself and use the D-pad, but that meant you had to shake the remote to do rolls. And I think that blowing thing as well that Guillaume already mentioned was mapped to that, but just while you were crouched down. So, like, that wasn't great. But then the 3DS version comes along, and okay, well, that's gone. Like, you've got like a slide pad, circle pad kind of control scheme and a D-pad control scheme. But, and the 3D effect was nice because, you know, those levels, the way that they were constructed with polygonal graphics, kind of, and the different layers and kind of going into the background and stuff were actually quite kind of good fits to show off the stereoscopic 3D in some ways. However, you still did have the issue of, like, you know, that they were worlds and levels, you know, constructed around a higher resolution than what the 3DS offered. And it wasn't always like that easy to kind of read everything. It did feel like it was shrunk down a bit, you know, as a result of that, especially, you know, some of the earlier 3DS models, you know, that were still about back then. And then you've got it did affect the frame rate, the conversion to 3DS. It was not as smooth as it was on Wii. So with this, you would obviously, you know, you're going to lose the stereoscopic 3D, but you hopefully you go, okay, we've just got solid D-pad controls without any of the motion stuff, but we've also got the, you know, kind of high resolution and the good frame rate to go with it. That should be, you know, pretty nice for, you know, what I do like Tropical Freeze better on the whole, but you know, and a lot of that is about the presentation, which, you know, yes, this will make it look nicer, but it won't really change it, you know, fundamentally.
Yeah, it's an HD version.
It's an upscale to a fair degree, isn't it? You know, it's nothing fancy. But it was still, you know, an enjoyable, challenging platformer from my memory. Even the 3DS playthrough at this point has got to be more than 10 years ago. So it's a bit fuzzy, but I remember enjoying it.
Cool. We haven't talked about Zelda somehow.
Okay.
Yeah. So, who wants to kick this one off?
I guess, like do I describe what the trailer was about? No, people have seen it at this point.
What's it called? Let's start with that.
The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom.
Thank you, John.
That might be like the least. Like I could not remember
Well-
what the title was. Like people on the Discord would mention Echoes of Wisdom, and I would start thinking like they're talking about Metroid.
No. Talking about Zelda. Talking about the new Zelda game.
Well, it's funny, though. We had an email that we haven't addressed about a month ago from PPKO talking about should they change the name of the Zelda series because, in part, Zelda has never been the protagonist of it, and it's kind of
she's been the stealth antagonist by causing the problem.
But and then of course we don't do that email, and then a few weeks later it's all she is the protagonist now.
Yeah,
the Legend of Zelda: the causer of problems.
Yeah. So my knee-jerk reaction as I watched the trailer, the reveal, and I'm sure a lot of people got it, was like, oh, of course they didn't give Zelda a sword. They gave her some gimmick, like she can't be allowed to just kick ass. But then I changed my mind pretty quickly because just swapping a character, just a palette swap is exactly like that's pretty boring. That's pretty unoriginal, and ultimately, I feel like we have a lot of Zelda games out there. We have a lot of Zelda clones out there. Like you've got indies trying their own take on the 2D Zelda. Yeah. And the last few times that Nintendo tried their hand at a new 2D Zelda, it was, like they were okay. I know that, James, you think that they were less than okay. I know that a Link Between Worlds was just...
It's baby's first Zelda, yes.
Right. So I'd rather have Nintendo do something like this and completely change up the gameplay than just go... make another kind of middling 2D Zelda where it's clear that their heart is not in it. Like the people making Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom and the whatever comes next, like they're the ones, they're the A team, and then you've got the 2D Zelda developers who I don't know, like they just. It's not that interesting.
Well, again, we don't know for sure who's making this because Nintendo is going to be coy about that. And Anuma was present. This was the one place where they slowed down a little bit, right? Because they actually wanted to explain this new mechanic with the tri-rod and all that. That it's trying to actually explain what is different about this. Because as you mentioned, anybody who's seen the trailer would have seen the aesthetic is very much the Link's Awakening remake aesthetic. So it's kind of like, okay, I could see why they felt the need to, we need to explain explicitly, because there's a lot of stuff in this direct that just goes by with almost no context whatsoever. The pace was so kind of brisk. In particular, there was that kind of somewhat intriguing the Mio trailer, which kind of looked like some sort of action platformer thing with this like watercolor aesthetic and stuff. They said nothing. There was any kind of explanation at all.
No, it's almost, I know less than I did before I knew it existed.
Yeah, so, stuff would come and go. With this, clearly, it's like, the trailer was cute. You see Link, fighting Ganon, get to see Ganon in that like toy style that Link's Awakening remake had, and he looks very cute and silly. But then Link is sucked into a portal and he frees Zelda as his last act, and then Zelda, runs away. And it's like, yes, okay, we're doing a Zelda protagonist game, but it was important, I think, to slow down a little bit. They didn't spend ages on it, but just give us
it got like 4 minutes
into how different this was going to be as new. That's it. We talked about all these possibilities about 3D Zelda remakes, top-down Zelda remakes. They actually gave us a new one. Now, again, it could be Grezzo making it. I doubt it's like entirely done by like core Zelda people, but probably but supervised clearly.
Oh yeah, I want to go back a little bit to talk about Guillaume's point here. Like I saw a little bit of like, well, why can't Zelda have a sword? And to your point, one, I think that'd be boring. Yeah. But two, I think it does sort of, that's like the whole concept that they've got here is that these characters have a role, and like that's not her role. Her role is to do other stuff. And so I thought this was an interesting way of saying like, yeah, she can still accomplish something in that role and we can leverage it and lean into it and make this more of a puzzle solvey thing.
Yes and no. I mean, like they write the games. They can literally have
Sure,
her
they
do anything.
can,
When
I
was
think,
when she was dressed up as Sheik in Ocarina of Time? Is that like
she didn't do anything? She just teleported in and out. She's just here. I am. Bye.
Right.
I actually think that this did more to make this a more interesting game as a consequence. And yeah, I think them actually holding to that makes it more interesting in the larger context of the series. I think that actually is like, hey, okay, she's not going to go in there and be a fighter like Link does. Okay, what's she going to do instead? How's she going to solve the problem? And then going through and iterating on ideas and figuring out like what makes sense here. And what they settled on is she is a drop shipping IKEA furniture counterfeiter, which is a bold choice to make. I never expected Zelda would be running her own Temu, but that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, IKEA is just like out of business wherever she is because there's no way they can compete with that.
I mean, no, they're just going to sue. They're just going to sue the shit out of her for stealing their designs, which they should, and she should lose. But that's fine.
Yeah,
the legal system will have its way and will be there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like so, the idea of I can replicate the things I've seen. I was describing it as the Legend of Scribblenauts earlier, because there is a very Scribblenautsian solution here. Because it's like, okay, I need to deal
great,
with.
By the way,
that is unfortunate phonetically.
I need to deal with this monster. Well, I will summon a bigger monster. Now, what I hope is it has the same Scribblenauts outcome of I have summoned the bigger monster, and now, this has gone very wrong. Why did I say T-Rex that can breathe fire? I doubt they're going to be that willing to just let the entire thing devolve into absolute pandemonium. But
it's interesting, on a few levels, really, because how much this will be. In some ways, you could consider this. And we have yet to see more of the game. Although it's coming out in September, right? So
we're going to see it pretty soon.
It's close at hand, but and so more details will certainly come, as well before that. But in some ways, like it might be the most kind of substantially original top-down Zelda, going all the way back to Spirit Tracks, right? Because I mean, Link Between Worlds, and I'm quite fond of it. But it has a world from Link to the Past, like that. I mean, there are differences, but it's a bit like Zero Mission, right? In that it's its own game, but it's so kind of based on a previous game that it wasn't like an entirely original top-down Zelda. Now, there's still lots about. Link Between Worlds that is its own, especially like the merge mechanic and stuff, and that I think is cool. But what I think is an interesting kind of journey that they've gone on really is that after Skyward Sword, Link Between Worlds was kind of the first step in the process that got us to Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. In that, right, it's like we've got a even though we are literally using the worlds from a Link to the Past, we want to break that template a bit. And this whole idea of renting the items and letting people do stuff in a different order and all this stuff, like these are the kind of first steps on the path that led you to Breath of the Wild, and then even further that with Tears of the Kingdom. And this tri-rod seems to me, and this is not something you start with in Tears of the Kingdom, so I guess it could be considered a spoiler, but it's been more than a year. Auto build. It's a
little bit.
It's definitely got a fair bit of precedent from Tears of the Kingdom there, so it kind of feels like we've come all the way now to the point that this cycle that began with a top-down game kind of inspiring what would come next in the 3D games, we're now porting that back into a top-down game again. But there's a crucial difference here in that one of the sort of limitations, or as much as I have a lot of affection for Link Between Worlds, but one of the sort of legitimate criticisms I think you could you could certainly make at it is that the fact that you may only have one item for a specific dungeon means that, oftentimes the solution is, very obvious because it's like, well, it's not going to be some interesting combination of various things that you've got, which actually, was something that Skyward Sword was relatively strong at, right? Is that, that they did keep using the different items rather than, use the spinner in this dungeon and then very rarely again, which was kind of the problem in Twilight
and made
Princess.
you think about like what to do with them too. Like, okay, I have this thing. What's its job?
Yeah, exactly. So you kind of lost some of that with A Link Between Worlds because they had to account for the fact that the way they'd created this game, where the structure was less linear and imposed, that's all you might have. So you have to make a dungeon that only has essentially the variables of merging into the wall, which you always have, and that particular item. And that was limiting. Now, what they're promising here is the exact opposite of that. Is like, no, you can, much like Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, especially Tears of the Kingdom with the auto-build parallel, you can solve things many different ways. And it's up to you kind of had to find some combination of objects that you can summon to get this done. But there is not one solution to this. That's very much what they're promising. And that is definitely, clearly inspired by the recent 3D Zeldas, but also very much the opposite of what Link Between Worlds was.
Yeah, and that excites me a lot more than it could otherwise, because I found, and that was what I talked about with Link Between Worlds, that like they had the whole like you could also rent the items but you lose them, and it was like that all felt superfluous, like they were just trying to, because it was like it's only marginally more expensive to buy them, so if you rent them you're an idiot. But you basically knew what every dungeon was and you just did it, and it was like, cool, it's the same puzzle over and over and over again, and it sucked. It sucks. The puzzles in that game suck. They just suck. They're just bad. And this, if you can do if you can solve this in all kinds of goofy and ridiculous ways, that was some of the most interesting and most like shareable stuff in Breath of the Wild. Less so at Tears of the Kingdom, because the build mechanics basically just meant you could do whatever the fuck you wanted anyway. But there is some stuff in there that, like, the build mechanics come in part from them seeing people do bullshit with a log in Tears of the Kingdom. Like, okay, I'm going to use the physics and the stupid one where you could build up momentum on something and just hit this log a bunch of times and then hop on and ride it as I get rocketed across the stage. They basically did this. They basically said, okay, let's turn that into an actual feature. And yeah, I see a lot of that here as well. And so the idea of, they started with, you can just stack beds to make a ladder, is very stupid and very funny. But it kind of makes me think of something like a Super Nintendo game that we never got because it only came out on the Satellaview or something like that. Like a very weird concept game that wouldn't get made anymore, and certainly not with the Zelda franchise on it.
Yeah, and it's going to be a little bit rough around the edges, so you can probably break it.
Yeah, but that's okay. Like I think being able to break it is probably part of the fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
I agree.
yeah,
Well, since it's so tile-based, though, I'm not so sure that it's going to be that easy to break. I don't know. Although there are some effects, you see, like, she places a box in front of something that's blowing air, and like it just slowly slides off the. So yeah, there are some like physics here, but
I don't necessarily mean like break it from the standpoint of I have destroyed this game, or I have like, but like be able to do things that the developers probably didn't think of and solve problems in ways that it probably wasn't intended. I did notice we had both types of Zoras on screen at the same time.
Yeah, that's true.
That was very weird.
It's kind of definitely some Ocarina kind of era imagery, like the Deku Tree, that particular version of it, the Gerudo, so yeah, kind of going beyond the Link to the Past kind of, but those Zoras were like, yeah, very much the old school ones were very much the Link to the Past ones, but then yeah, also their kind of post Ocarina counterparts in the same place at the same time. I don't think that's been done before, but I guess the one question I have in terms of this issue of like, okay, so is this like the almost the first like entirely original top-down Zelda since Spirit Tracks? And obviously Spirit Tracks and Phantom Hourglass were kind of a bit of their own thing with the change in the input mechanism and whatnot. But the glimpses that we have of the world, there are familiar landmarks, and I mean, of course there would be, right? I mean, every version of Hyrule tends to stick to certain kinds of, features of roughly where Death Mountain is and where Hyrule Castle is and Kakariko Village and so forth. But still, it looked quite a lot like the Link to the Past overworld. So I don't want to just assume that it's actually going to be that different from A Link Between Worlds in that way.
Yeah, some people online have spotted kind of a few key landmarks, and from that scene where she looks over the whole kingdom, and it seemed to match pretty closely the map from A Link to the Past. So but that, again, like that kind of makes sense. I'm sure that does it matter that much ultimately? I'm sure that they're gonna, whatever they're doing, like the dungeons are gonna be completely original, and the you're not going to go around the world in the same way anyway. So it's not like you know what to expect. No,
obviously, the merging into the wall thing and all that was a huge part of like traversal and that how the light world, dark world sort of interplay functioned in A Link Between Worlds, and obviously that will be gone. Also, it has to be said, this sort of suggestion from the opening of perhaps some sort of new underworld that is not the dark world that we see Link fall into and a bunch of other people have apparently fallen into. Presumably at some point that could be a place that you actually go to, that if the regular overworld is not so different from, top-down Zeldas of the past, perhaps wherever that leads is more different. We'll see on that, I guess. But
I mean, Nintendo went and just completely hid the existence of the depth before
they did.
Tears of the Wild,
which is wild.
No, exactly. Yeah. That was a pretty, ballsy thing to do in a lot of ways, but it worked in terms of the impact of when you're confronted with the actual scale of what's down there when you're not prepared for it. Is also,
also I just said Tears of the Wild and I'm aware. Thank you. Anyway, what I meant.
Yes. Precise. I mean, they're kind of maybe alluding to things here with the trailer. How deep that goes in a literal and figurative sense, we've yet to see. But I guess we're probably going to start finding out some things before the release date. But they might be, they might be keeping some of that just up their sleeves because it can be more impactful that way.
But
sorry.
Was that another? Is there just something else you want to say about it?
No, I was going to move on to another game.
I was going to ask, does anybody else want to touch on something?
Well, I know that you started the show with Ace Attorney Investigation, said it was the biggest thing, but I feel like in terms of retro re-releases by Capcom, a lot of people maybe would disagree with you and might say
they're wrong.
The actual biggest deal is Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection Arcade Classics.
I can prove that they're wrong. Because they bothered to put the Ace Attorney Investigations game on Xbox and not this one. Therefore, they agree with me. Boom!
I see. At any rate, the pretty big deal, I think, Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection includes basically, I think, all the Marvel vs. Capcom, or all the Capcom-made Marvel fighting games that may or may not be Marvel versus Capcom, like you've got the X-Men.
Children of the Atom was the first one.
It doesn't include all of them because it only has Marvel 2, right?
Yeah, it doesn't have Marvel 3 from the PS3 era. Yeah,
or Marvel 1. Or is Marvel 1 just Capcom Street Fighter vs. X-Men?
I need to look it up, I guess. But the 3, I think. No one's gonna miss it.
I have it here.
No, there are people who like 3.
I think 3. I mean, 3. As I had 3 on.
You're thinking of MVC that people don't like.
I had 3 on PS3. I mean, it definitely got some shit because they did the whole like ultimate thing. Where they had like the Super Street Fighter type of like upgrade. but they did it like as a entirely sort of separate retail release at that point, rather than doing it as, you know, something that you could buy as an expansion for the retail release of the original MVC3. And that pissed people off. But the game itself, I think, was relatively kind of well received as the first go at that in quite a while. You know, and being with polygonal graphics and stuff, you know. For me, like, I had not owned any of the MVC games back in the past, but, you know, I played a bit in arcades years ago. I had a friend who had a Saturn, and he had like the ports that were much better than the PlayStation ones, and would use the memory expansion thing to, you know, be able to do it and stuff. And that was stuff I was always jealous of, because I was pretty big into Marvel stuff in the 90s with the X-Men show in 92, and then, you know, kind of led me into reading the comics and stuff. So it's always stuff that I thought looked really cool, the great pixel art and all that, but I've never owned it. So this was one of the big shocks, I think, of the whole thing, I've got to say, because you just, with Disney these days, you don't, and the way that the fourth MVC game kind of just landed with a total thud, it didn't seem that likely that they would be, you know, kind of rekindling this in any way. And it had been a while since these had been made available. I think it was back in the 360, PS3 era that happened. So you couldn't take anything for granted. But I get, it does kind of make some sense from the point of view that, again, that 90s X-Men show was, you know, kind of part of the impetus for this whole thing, with how it tied into the Children of the Atom, which was the first fighting game that Capcom made with Marvel properties. And of course, with the X-Men coming back on Disney Plus now, it's kind of like, well, this, if you were ever going to try and like piggyback off something with selling these games again, now would be the time. So maybe I shouldn't have been as surprised as I was, but I was, like, genuinely, when it immediately it references the character select music of MVC2, Take You for a Ride. So as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, is this what I think it is? Like, and then, yes, it was. So it was like, that was a cool moment. A lot of this stuff is like varying degrees of predictable in Nintendo Directs, but that was, to me, a shock.
Yeah. Also, I was confusing maybe 3 with Infinite, which... I don't know. I tried to play it and I couldn't get into it at all.
Infinite's the one people just don't like. 3 is the 3D game. It was originally released for arcades and then on Dreamcast, I believe.
No, that 3 was PS3 again.
3 is PS3. Okay, yeah. What was the Dreamcast one then? Dreamcast was the first. Dreamcast might have been the first MVC, because it was the two. It was the two X-Men versus Street Fighter games. It was that one. Then there was like Ultimate X-Men versus Street Fighter. And then it was Marvel versus Capcom. And then 2 rolls around. I can't remember what was what. But they're, like, those all banged, like, it was like 97, 98, 99.
Yeah, they were doing, you know, one a year for a good while, you know. So, but for me, like, in terms of my entry point for like owning these games, it was actually Tatsunoko versus Capcom on Wii.
Which is a very weird.
Yeah, I mean, I had the Japanese version of that, and that was really cool, actually. And so then that maybe when MVC comes back on PS3, and even though obviously it's kind of different in terms of the style, because the PS3 more powerful system, more, you know, kind of a, you know, obviously a Marvel comic book kind of look that they're going for, you can still see it, like how much like that you know, the Tatsunoko game is kind of the basis for that third game, and they're both pretty damn cool.
I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff in this collection. It's not just the fighting games. It's got a bunch of side scrollers in there.
Well, it's got
I think there's only one.
Yeah, the Punisher.
It's got the Punisher.
The Punisher brawler, which it's the Punisher and Nick Fury, which is a bit of a weird duo as far as I know.
Yeah, they needed 2 beefy men that could largely be the same silhouette. Basically.
Yeah, I guess so. But like the interesting thing about that, which was the first of the Capcom sort of collaborations with Marvel in that era before they did the X-Men fighting game that really, you know, kickstarted everything else. That has a soundtrack by Shimomura, and it is really recognizably Shimomura. Like, if you've heard enough of her stuff over the years, I defy you to hear that and not think, oh, it's good. Even if you didn't know, you'd recognise it. And obviously not in the kind of, Mario and Luigi, Kingdom Hearts bouncy kind of way, because it's the Punisher and it's a beat 'em up and it's an arcade game. But it's very much, the urgent RPG battle music Shimamura. Like, that, you're getting that in a brawler. It's kind of cool.
All right. Anything? So yeah, this game is not coming to Xbox or PS5. The PS4, obviously, you'll be able to play it there. But it's not. It does not appear to be coming to Xbox at all. So weird.
No. Well, I don't know. Like, probably, yeah. Like, people on Xbox, I gotta say, don't buy a whole lot of movies unless they're not on Game Pass and like unless they're on deep discount and really old. So I can understand.
This feels like a Game Pass product, though. Like,
yeah, exactly. But maybe Microsoft is not really offering the incentives that they used to put games on Game Pass day one, and I don't know.
It feels like it should be there. It feels like a weird omission.
If I had to guess, and it's very, very much a guess, and not very educated either, I would assume the structure of the licensing agreement between Capcom and Disney, Marvel, essentially comes into play here. That there's just something about kind of licensing for having the agreement cover another platform when you're probably not expecting to do a lot of your business on that platform. Might have just swung it into it's simpler to just not bother territory.
That would, yeah, but still, like, that must be very frustrating if you're an Xbox.
It's person. Not great, no, it's not. But the reality of it is, with how much Switch owns the Japanese market, and then, how much obviously there's so many more PS5s out there in the world than there are Xbox Series consoles and so forth, that it just you've got to think that it's just simpler that way, because again, you try, and we've talked about some of these similar things a little bit in the past, like why haven't we seen the Disney Afternoon Collection on Switch, kind of thing. I assume it's just like, look,
same deal.
They had a deal that was specific for the platforms that are about at that time, and it's just more trouble than it's worth to go back and make a new deal to cover a new platform, and it's just not worth anybody's time, and they didn't do it.
All right. Let's do a little bit of rapid fire so we can take a quick break and then do a little bit of email. Farmagia is a stupid name. I don't have anything else to say about it. It's a very dumb name.
Yep, agreed.
It's a game where you grow wolves out of beanstalks.
Yeah, it's kind of like more agricultural Pikmin in a way.
I don't know,
but the Pikmin are animals as well.
It's very weird.
It's just a fight.
The Denpa men are back.
Keep going.
Congratulations, Guillaume.
The new Denpa men. Why me? I don't think I've ever talked about the Denpa men.
You are the one who was enamored by the "They Came by Wave" name.
Yeah, and you're just a Denpa men guy. I mean, I look at that and I'm like, Guillaume is gonna love
the
this.
Denpa man.
Yeah.
No, you were just the most amused by the name, I think.
I don't remember this at all, but then again,
it was a conversation in passing, probably. How much do you think we fucking talk about the Denpa men?
It's because you immediately absorbed it into your being, that's why.
It's,
I see.
I'm not comfortable with whatever the it is that was absorbed, so I'm just going to move on. It should have been the Denpa new men. I'm sorry, it just should have been. Please understand where to put your news. A Phantom Brave sequel, seemingly out of nowhere. Phantom Brave was one of the games that's been on the those collections that company's been putting out, Nipponichi. That was originally a PS2/Wii game. They're kind of weird. They're kind of interesting. I was shocked for this time. It's like, yeah, we're gonna make a Phantom Brave sequel. It's like, okay, cool. We got a remarkable amount of time. Tales of the Shire, Lord of the Rings. We knew about this game already.
Karen is really excited about this one.
I find it really off-putting for some reason.
Yeah, no, it looks weird to me, but like the pitch of like, have you ever dreamed of living the life of a hobbit?
No,
and, like, Karen was on board.
I just wish the character models actually looked better. They look pretty terrible.
Everything looks kind of bad. Everything looks kind of grungy, kind of almost upscaled Wii game. But like my biggest takeaway is: have I ever wanted to live the life of a hobbit? No, I have ambition in life. It's the least ambitious race in Middle Earth. They do nothing.
I think that's the words of the deceiver coming through there, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it sounds like the man
Might as well have been spoken in the black speech, am I right?
With the exception of two specific groups of hobbits, what have they done as a people?
Wow.
Nothing. They've done fuck all.
They just
Start calling you the mouth.
live their quiet lives. I think there's nothing wrong with
Their
that.
quiet lives without destroying their ecosystem.
There's literally a passage in one of the in-universe books where they're like, yeah, we just didn't bother writing about them in the past because they were so inconsequential. It's like, that is a thing that is explicitly explained for why they're not in the stuff from the first stage. Like, they weren't here, and then when they got here, they didn't really matter that much, whatever. I don't know.
Depends what your priorities are, James. Sounds like somebody's been using...
My priorities are keeping back the omnipresent evil that threatens all of the world for the last 5,000 years. That's my priorities.
Yeah, you say that now, and then,
It's not having 11sies.
You'll be...
Right, well, yeah, you say that now, and then that's why you should take the ring and use its power against...
Against the hobbits,
right.
Yes. I'm going to go deal with these...
Exactly.
These fucking freeloaders.
Pretty soon, James is just going to be hitting us with stuff like, your love of the halfling's leaf has clearly slowed your mind.
Look, I'm just saying, not the most important in the general affairs of Middle-earth. Also, there absolutely needs to be like a section where a ring wraith just rolls through and just does all kinds of...
Right, I would love it if it is like a complete sort of they're suckering us in. It's going to be this placid, kind of farm type of life sim type of thing, and then all of a sudden just the scouring of the Shire happens in the middle of it, and you've got to band together to drive out Sharky.
It does need something, because like it just feels so it feels amazingly low stakes, and I guess that was their intention, like kind of Animal Crossing-y.
Right. They called it a cozy game, so...
It should be a cozy game until Sharky shows up and enslaves everybody, yes.
And then it becomes a reskinned version of the Gollum game that they released.
Jesus.
It's like you're away from your town, your townspeople, and now you need to infiltrate or exfiltrate or whatever.
I just want to point out, to further cement my point, Gollum might be the fourth most accomplished hobbit in the entirety of Middle-earth's history. And that may actually not be a facetious statement. So...
Sure, but that just proves that just accomplishing something is not good or bad. So, there's nothing wrong with just, staying home.
Also,
and,
didn't the old Took or whatever, like, invent golf by hitting a goblin's head into a hole? So, I mean... I feel like you're glossing over that incredibly important.
Hold on. Are you telling me that you're going to like use that, my example, you got to think about the ramifications of accomplishing something, and you're going to be like, hey, a sport that the Saudis can pour their money into being invented by them is not a net bad. See? Look, I can do it too.
It's an accomplishment. Yeah.
James is about to tell us, like, do you like my new white robes? Look closer.
I'm just saying, like, you could have picked any other group in Middle-earth and it'd been more interesting than the fucking hobbits.
I assume the appeal is that it's not interesting, isn't it? It's that it's,
I guess,
in that may you live in interesting times, interesting way.
But this just feels like the kind of thing that's like the Tolkien estate must be absolutely miserable exists. What a product. What a product. Fucking tired of cozy games. Give me some strife.
Yeah, you're about as
goddammit.
non-cozy game as I can imagine.
Give
James.
me some fucking strife. That's what I need. We kind of got through. The 100-line Last Defense Academy. This is the game from the Danganronpa people. All I wanted to say is this has the worst logo of any game I've ever seen in my life. It's literally unreadable. Go look at the logo.
It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. Yeah.
It's in English, and I couldn't tell for a solid 2 seconds. because the fonts are just absolute fucking pandemonium.
Mio, Memories in Orbit, that looked interesting.
Yeah, but they told us so little about it.
Yeah, I mentioned that. That was just like, okay, here's intriguing visuals and so intriguing looking character locomotion, but nothing to really put any bones on that. So yeah, we'll set up this. Stay tuned, I guess.
Yeah, they showed us Luigi's Mansion 2, but it's Luigi's Mansion 2. We knew it existed.
Yeah,
this was one of those like, hey, it's coming.
It's within like a week, so
yeah.
You got to be quick with that.
Metal Slug Attack Reloaded came out. I haven't got a chance to touch it yet, but it looked interesting. They had that Metal Slug strategy game that they talked about a while ago.
Is that forever?
That's different
as well. Is that forever? Entertainment?
Oh,
it might have been, but yeah, it is a different game.
But yeah, this is tower defense. Right.
Yeah. I do like the idea of trying different things with the Metroids, with the Metal Slug artwork. Like, because the visuals of that series and its big sprites are interesting, and I enjoy seeing them. So doing things with them beyond standard Metal Slug gameplay, I think, has some interest to me. But yeah, it didn't show a lot. There's not a ton going on here. Lego Horizon Adventures. We knew it was a thing, but it's still very weird that it's coming to Switch. And they talked about Aloy and on her games on what system? Don't worry about it.
Also, I can't think of a Lego game I want less than one that focuses on combat. Like, yeah, I sure hope they have improved the combat a whole lot because, and I don't mean to like give us more options or whatever. Like there's something that they need to fix about these games and their combat.
Yeah, the combat just wasn't their focus.
No.
And then we're down in the dregs at this point, like updates to Among Us and fucking Funko Fusion, which looks absolutely god awful.
That's why I just skipped that segment, actually.
Yeah, right.
Fast forwarded through it.
I think it's worth seeing because of how bad it looks. It actually, I mean, it looks bad from the perspective of its Funko Pops, and those are just universal bad.
Yeah, and but, it's.
But it also just doesn't look good.
No, it accurately looks as terrible as Funko Pop dolls do.
But like the fidelity of the visuals is bad, which is amazing because these are relatively simple models. Yeah, I don't know.
People read Ready Player One and they imagined something really high fidelity and really, like accurate to the franchises that were in there. But like, no, this game, Funko Fusion, is what the actual Ready Player One would look like.
God help us. I think of anything else. Fantasian is coming to Switch. I think we might have known that.
We hoped.
Okay, yeah, I think when it came off of Apple Arcade, right?
Yeah, it was released in two separate, batches. Not batches, but anyway, like it was two releases. They released part 1 and then part 2 a few months later. I started part 1 and then eventually kind of fell off. It's it's a simple little RPG affair. It's not really... I don't know. Some people really love it. I'm not really one of them. And also there was like a weird thing about how they went through the trouble of making these really elaborate maquettes, right? That was going to be the world of the game. They took these pictures. They seem to have taken the lowest possible resolution pictures that you could imagine. It's really bad because then those really beautifully detailed maquettes don't look good. Like they just look a little bit blurry, a little bit kind of crappy. And from what I could see of the footage, like that's not fixed because I think that maybe their source material is just compromised, they just took crappy resolution photos and now they're kind of stuck with that. It's really weird.
Yep. There's a couple other things. I don't know that we really need to dig into any of the others. Does anybody... Oh, we're getting basketball in Nintendo Switch Sports, which really felt like out of nowhere. Because that game's, 2 years old now?
It's not a reason for me to go back to Nintendo Switch Sports.
No,
I don't think.
But it was just like literally out of the blue. Here comes basketball.
Especially when you have Looney Tunes Wacky World of Sports coming out in the fall.
Jesus, that looked rough. That looked rough.
Yeah.
I was surprised to see another update for Disney Illusion Island. It feels like that they feel that game is very important. And I don't entirely understand it, but...
Well, maybe it sold well?
Maybe.
Question mark?
Maybe. I don't know. Anything else anybody want to talk about?
No.
All right, cool. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. We're going to do a little bit of email. We're kind of long, so we're going to try to breeze through them, but please stay tuned. We're back. We're going to do a little bit of listener mail. We actually got a decent amount of listener mail in response to the Direct, but just as a consequence of us talking through the games that we were interested in. And honestly, which is probably intersects mostly with the stuff y'all are interested in. We kind of addressed a lot of it already. We got some emails that were just kind of like a point by point, like, what did you think of this game? What did you think of this game? And the answer is, we just told you in the last segment. There's a couple that were like, are they ever going to let Shu Takumi make another game? And the answer is, yeah, probably. Shu Takumi could probably do whatever he wants. I just don't know that he wants to do much of anything right now, so that's probably the answer. We're getting investigations, which has nothing, which he didn't really work on, but we did get the 2 great Ace Attorney games. Those were also holdouts, so we're down to one last Ace Attorney game not on Switch, and that's Leighton vs. Wright. And he wrote that game, and boy, did he write that game. Boy, did he write that game. Specific color of black. I'm not going to go any more into detail than that. But that is the most bullshit thing I have ever heard. And that's saying a lot in that series. Because Guillaume mentioned that the last game talked about a country governed by a spirit channeling cult. And it's more bullshit than that. So, yeah. Yeah. Like Greg knows what I'm talking about. It's complete nonsense.
Oh yeah, but it also fits
upsetting.
in. But it also does fit in really well with the Leighton series of
Oh, yeah.
bullshit as well. So I mean, I would have expected and indeed hoped for nothing less.
This man looked at the Leighton plots and said, "Underground fake London? Bet I can do worse than that," and he did. Which is the worst. He wrote one Leighton game and said, "My work is done here," and walked out. And everybody else agreed with him. It's like, no, you did it. You did it, brother. So yeah, Shu Takumi will ride again one day. But I'd love to get that game rescued from really absolute state of unavailability. Just so people can see it. Because it is really good. It's super fucking long, though. Holy shit. But it's excellent. And unfortunately, a lot of the Leighton games are also trapped in the time warp. So those getting rescued too would be nice. Nintendo, I'm looking at you. But let's get to some email that was asking about stuff maybe a little bit as a jumping off point from the Direct. And John, I would like you to read actually, can you read Andrew's email?
Sure. Andrew writes, "Gentlemen, titles in yesterday's Nintendo Direct included a 3D remake of Romancing Saga 2 and HD 2D remakes of the first 3 Dragon Quest games. In the last several years, Square Enix has been active in releasing remakes and remasters for many of their IPs, including lesser-known series like Live Alive, Front Mission, and ActRaiser. Chrono Trigger is one of the most beloved games of all time, yet it is entirely absent on modern consoles. Chrono Cross received a re-release several years ago, but Chrono Trigger is still MIA. What gives? Thanks."
So I will say that in the case of the Front Mission, that was actually done externally by somebody who bought the license. Or, well, leased the license, I guess. But yeah, the point...
That's forever entertainment.
It is, yeah. Because we were joking, they were promising more and more Front Mission games, and they hadn't even released the first one yet. We're like, please.
That's true, and I mean, we're still waiting for like Panzer Dragoon 2, right?
Yeah, Forever Entertainment is taking their name very literally. Yeah, so Square Enix is releasing a lot of their back catalog. They are historically known for doing this. They're doing remakes. That's newer. That's newer territory for them. A lot of time it was just, re-releasing stuff. But yeah, Chrono Trigger is an interesting omission because they did do the DS game. That was a long time ago now.
Yeah.
But the DS game is not really like a big remake. It's obviously they had to make changes because of the format, and there's some new
they had
content.
to adapt to the different resolution, but they kind of moved the UI to the other screen, and they had to kind of redo the music a little bit. I mean, it's pretty damn faithful, but it isn't exactly accurate to what the Super Famicom version was and stuff.
And there is like a smattering of new content, I think.
Yeah, it's insubstantial, really, but there is a bit of extra stuff. There's the different localization as well, that was a bit more kind of, well, first of all, just not constrained by cartridge size. Which, of course, the original English localization was, but certain like terminology, like the way that like Magus is referred to as the Fiend Lord in the new localization, which I don't think he ever was in the the American Chrono Trigger back in '95. So yeah, there were some little differences there. I think there was a little bit of with that extra content referencing kind of the somewhat kind of vague ties to Chrono Cross and Radical Dreamers, and you had like the compressed versions of the animated videos from the PlayStation version, so it tried to bring together some stuff, some things. But you haven't really had anything since, and apart from Chrono Cross getting a first like reissue, I guess that as was already mentioned. But I think maybe the explanation is that it falls into a little bit of a kind of odd spot in terms of as you mentioned with Front Mission, for instance. Perhaps if it were less kind of beloved or of less kind of stature, maybe it could have got licensed out. But then, if it were more commercially powerful, if it was, not something that's been mostly kind of, a kind of, what would you say, really, inert franchise for decades at this point, then, you might be more tempted to, give it a sort of royal treatment kind of remake in that way. So perhaps because it's just beloved enough but not current enough, it falls into this space of like, we'd like to do something with it one day but not now because there's not necessarily some great imperative.
Yeah, like the problem with Chrono Trigger is that there's nothing you can do that will make everyone happy. Like it's the crushed by weight of your own expectations thing. Like the game is revered. So if I wanted to do a remake and I didn't go all out, let's say I did a relatively modest remake. Let's say I did an HD 2D remake, which isn't modest, but it's not like we talked about with SaGa 2, where it's almost a reimagining. There are going to be people who are not as caught up on that. Like, well, this is a more important game than whatever HD 2D game in question. And there's going to be, to Greg's point, like, okay, now you've closed yourself off from doing something with it bigger for the next 5 years, at least. Like, in theory, yes, you could do something else with it, but I think they would be reticent to do it. Like, we talked about that SaGa 2 got a remake on Switch already, but that remake is very much just a port of a phone game, which it is in and of itself not a particularly ambitious remake. It is largely just an exercise in making the game available more than it is a remake.
Mm-hmm.
That if you were to go and keep it more traditional, and people are going to say you didn't do enough, if you go wild and reimagine it, then you run the risk of diluting what makes that game classic.
Sullying its good name.
Right. So, like, what do you do with it to make it to hit the right balance? And I think the other thing that they might realize that the audience might not is that the game itself, this is not to demean its quality, it has limitations that it works within the bounds of very well. But it's not a particularly big game in a lot of ways. It's got a lot of art assets you'd have to produce. So it comes into this like weird space of like, this game would have to be expensive because it's going to take a lot to make, but there's not a lot of it there. Does that make sense? Like, you can do a very complete playthrough of that game in a relatively short period of time.
Sure, but And then it was meant to be replayed, right? And
Sure.
kind of the different endings was a little bit gimmicky, but they did what they could with the space and the cartridge that they could. But basically, after you finished it once, you could play it again, and from there, you could decide to go try and beat Lavos at different parts of the story, and you'd get really often like really weird little endings that didn't always make much sense, but it was like weird what if scenarios where like, oh, like what if you went to prehistory and then immediately went and beat Lavos and then everyone was turned into dinosaurs for some reason.
Yeah, and like I feel
he
like
never got to wipe them out, did he? That's why.
Right.
Oh, that's true. I feel like they would want to do more with that as well. Like to really justify a big remake. So it's that
it would be
balance.
an option, but I mean I think the point is this, isn't it? What we've seen from Square Enix over the past several years is a lot of different possibilities that you could have, right? I mean, for instance, it's always been a bit of a surprise to me that we haven't had like a remake in a more substantial kind of way of like Final Fantasy VI. Like that, because that is such a humongous game, right? That is a game of tremendous importance in that series. But some of it's because they've spent eons remaking Final Fantasy VII in the most lavish possible way that just keeps going and going into multiple games on PS5 now. So that's part of it. But you do have the pixel remasters that we referenced earlier on, right? So it's like that's one thing you could do with Chrono Trigger, just like probably the least likely to kind of alienate people, right? Is that something that's mostly like the DS version was, but just without some of the limitations that the DS version had in terms of like resolution and stuff, right? So you could take the same kind of approach to bringing a pixel art game into the current era of displays and all that, so just tweaking the pixel art a little bit, but just to trying to keep that the spirit of it alive, but recognizing the fact that certain ways that pixel art was drawn in the old days was with the explicit recognition that image would get sort of warped by CRT TVs, and that doesn't happen anymore. So, like just tweaking it and refining it a little bit, but trying to stay as true as possible to what it actually, what it was intended to look like back then on modern displays and stuff. And other than that, it's pretty much a straight remake. That's something they could have done, they have not done. Then you've got, the HD 2D thing, which, as again, they're taking relative, I don't think it's as much of an enterprise as that Final Fantasy VII example, but the Dragon Quest III HD 2D we already talked about. Again, it's this huge, relatively very lavish sort of version of that concept, right? Because that was an incredibly important game in that series. As we already mentioned, it was immensely popular, this real zenith of Dragon Quest kind of mania. So, they could have done something like that, something that they did for Live Alive as well, which is a relatively obscure game in Square's past, at least to those of us in the West, because it didn't get localized. But even I think in Japan, it's not
Japan,
like hugely celebrated or anything. So it was, it's not like they've reserved the HD 2D remake only for something of the stature and significance of Dragon Quest III. So that was on the table. And then another thing is the kind of the 3D remake of Secret of Mana that happened. Where it was actually, just more conventional, kind of 3D graphics and so forth.
Right.
So they've given us the full sort of buffet, of like, these are all the different ways that we could take it, and they've chosen none of them.
Right. Was that like exclusively on Vita or something? I feel like it came and went and we never heard about it again.
I don't think so. I don't think it was enormously warmly received, and that kind of goes to James' point, right, about the maybe the pitfalls of some of these things. I guess it did kind of lead into the more positively received 3D remake of Seiken Dead Sets 3, which
Yes.
I think that was obviously less well known because it wasn't localized originally. Trials of Mana, I believe, is what they ended up calling it.
It was Steam PS4 apparently, and yeah, it was not well received.
And PlayStation Vita, and that was it. That remake. So so there's that, but also people are just like, wow, this is fucking horrible.
Yeah, people are like if you search for it, the second result is PSA Secret of Mana Remake is horrible.
Yeah.
Oh god. So that's the point. I know definitely the Trials of Mana 3D game, which kind of built off it. There's some kind of overlap there in terms of the approach, but I think the Trials of Mana one was better thought of, as an adaptation of what that game was. But again, there's less affection for Trials of Mana, the original game, because it wasn't localized over here, right? So it's not as important to people as Secret of Mana. So I guess you can't upset people necessarily in the same way, as well as we've always got probably a bit safer doing that one. But that's the point. We've got all these approaches, and they just, clearly, and then not to mention some of the other ones that the email brought in, where they get licensed out, like as you already mentioned, Front Mission and stuff. So there's just all these possibilities, but clearly you have to feel like it's just like it's important enough to them that they're not going to do it willy-nilly, but it is not on the scale of something like Final Fantasy VII or indeed Dragon Quest III. So it's not something that's going to occupy their resources over many years to make sure that it's done right either.
I was trying to find a quote that I only half remember, so I don't remember exactly who at Square said it, but there was like some years ago, like they were asked like, why not a Final Fantasy VI remake, and whatever director said, well, it was not my game, so I feel like it wouldn't be I feel like it would be disrespectful to remake it or something. That was basically the gist of the response.
And of course that's with respect to Sakaguchi not being at Square anymore, right?
Right, maybe, yeah. But also, Tetsuya Nomura did work on Final Fantasy VI as a pixel artist for the monsters, and apparently he gave like a recent answer in an interview about his work. Like he said that was one of the few games that he did feel like he could have done better on. But he didn't, as I said, like he wasn't director, like he was just the pixel artist. Anyway, like so probably he's not the one who said that he wouldn't remake it. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just like seeing like stuff like Square Enix is
it's
still
an
kind
example of the kind of thing that can hold these remakes up, right? Like, of course, as has been mentioned, James, theory about Kawazu having, this sort of dossier of embarrassing things on all the movers and shakers at Square Enix. But the point is, he's there. He is in the building still, right? So the stuff that connects back to, his babies from the past, you're not going to have any of this kind of, reluctance or politics about, would we have to bring this person back, or are we comfortable, doing it without them, or this hesitancy.
Also, like now, I think that this answer that I read about, years ago must have been before Final Fantasy VII Remake, before we even knew what that was. And so I feel like, I wonder if that answer was also given in a way, like, the person giving that answer knew what the Final Fantasy VII Remake was going to be like. And so that kind of casts a different light on, like, oh yeah, sure, I will completely overhaul and upend and, just like... Final Fantasy VII, they're not remaking it. They're just making a completely new game with like some similarities. Yeah. So if that answer was taking that into account, I can understand why, we're not going to remake Final Fantasy VI to that extent.
And we talk to people who aren't in the building anymore. Also, who wants to be the guy who goes like, yeah, I'll helm the remaking this revered game. And forever have that on my neck if it's not good? No, I'm going to pass.
Well, and it goes deeper with Chrono Trigger than it does with even something like a Final Fantasy VI, because of course a lot of not only is it warmly thought of by people who played the game back then, but it was uniquely kind of a hype thing before it even existed because of the dream team, as was referred to, of developers that Square assembled to make it possible, right? Obviously, this is back in the Square Soft days before the merger with Enix, and yet it was bringing together Akira Toriyama, Yuji Horii with Sakaguchi to make an RPG, so that part of it now, especially with the passing of Toriyama and stuff, it only gets more kind of complicated in a way than it was before, and that's why Chrono Cross was simpler, because that was not a product of the Dream Team in the same way, right? So, yeah, that in that sense, at least, that's why you can explain why we've had a Cross, kind of remake or whatever update version ahead of Trigger, even though it is not necessarily as warmly remembered.
But also Cross was available in less places. Like Trigger has been re-released in multiple
that was
contexts.
its first re-release, whereas Trigger at least did have the DS and the mobile ones, right?
And the PlayStation port at some point.
Yes, the disc, the the load time one, with the animated videos I mentioned.
So there was a certain amount of and they had the Radical Dreamers they could put in there too, which only makes sense in the context of releasing Cross, because it is effectively the prototype for what Cross ends up being from a story standpoint. So putting that in there, that was a compelling enough collection. They could have thrown a Super Nintendo game in there as well, but it would have stood out in a weird way, I think, and then there would have been pressure to do more to it. And again, this is the whole keeping the irons in the fire thing. Maybe they don't want to mess with it right now. Maybe this is a bad time for them. Square Enix also has a lot of fucking projects going on right now.
Yeah, and they've also kind of taken it on the chin with stuff like Avengers, right?
Yeah.
Well, and also what they've now. I mean, I don't know how much likelier a Chrono Trigger project is getting from the point of view that we've been told by Square Enix themselves that they are reorganizing and kind of restructuring their whole development kind of pipeline now, in terms of this, and it's been noted before they kind of ran into trouble with it, this odd number of releases relative. It seems like in so many ways the industry is just kind of stratifying into the companies that do these huge releases over here, and then indie developers are over there. Square were kind of straddling the line of the most lavish productions imaginable with something like Final Fantasy VII Remake, but on the other hand, your quick succession voice of cards games, and
oh my god, they released 3 of those things,
more modest scale things, and it just seems like in the future the indications certainly seem to be that they are going to focus on fewer titles, and that may not particularly. You wonder if in that kind of development environment, would the Live Alive remake have happened? I mean, I don't know. I mean, the circumstances of that, at least according to their public comments, are quite strange anyway, in terms of, this idea that Nintendo asked about making it available on NSO, and then it was like, maybe we should just remake it instead. I mean, it just seems very frivolous, doesn't it? But considering, those HD 2D remakes are no tiny thing with regard to development. It's not like, pressing a button or anything. There's a lot of work that goes into that. But, how much that should be taken at face value is another matter. But still, it just maybe the possibility for something like that is lesser now. And so could that point more in the direction of just a pixel remaster type thing coming eventually? Perhaps, but we really can't say.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the other email. I'll read it. This one is a bit more of a projection, so we'll deal with it as we go. Juan writes, "Hello there. After the recent happenings with Sony and Microsoft some weeks ago related to layoffs, no new major titles for 2024. I would argue that's debatable, but okay. increasing development costs, longer development cycles, and other similar stuff. I've noticed several videos on YouTube with the claim that Nintendo won the console wars. Kit and Krista podcast named one of their recent podcasts, Did Nintendo Just Win the Console Wars? Do you all agree with the premise that Nintendo won the console wars? If so, to what do you attribute Nintendo winning the... This fucking phrase just keeps happening. If not, what is your assessment of the current console wars? Do you think Nintendo did right, and that what both Sony and Microsoft did wrong for that perception to exist? And I just want to say console wars again one more time. No! No! The answer is no, because it's not a thing anymore. Not in that sense. Not for Nintendo. Well,
I guess maybe in this case, does it mean won this generation?
I don't even know what that means at this point.
But
they
the
made
problem
a
is,
shitload of
I mean, when Switch has been out so long that, when it came out, we were still in the middle of the Xbox One, PS4 generation. And now we're in the middle of the PS5 Series X generation.
So are you saying that the the Switch has only sold a fraction of what the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 4 Pro, and PlayStation 5 sold?
I don't even know if that's true. I think they might have sold about that total.
Probably. PlayStation 4 Slim. Anyway.
Yeah, there we go. I think the issue is that it's... The issue is that for it to be the console wars stuff, deals with a very specific type of competition that I'm not even sure Sony and Microsoft are doing against each other anymore. To some degree, but even less this generation as you're seeing Microsoft exclusives appear on other systems. Now, largely that's being driven. They say it's being driven by making sure they have market availability to sell their products. It's largely being driven by economic interest and, yes, by settlements they had to make in order to get the merger with Activision Blizzard King approved. The concessions that were required in order to get through antitrust concerns. Sony's putting their games on PC, with the exception of the show. They're not really putting their console games in other places, other games on other consoles. The show is weird because the license with baseball kind of forced the issue.
That went straight to Game Pass.
It did, and that's where I played it. And I think it went straight to Game Pass again the next year. But again, I think that's largely a function of the deal with baseball, less Sony's a change in Sony's perspective on how they think the industry should work. Sony stuff is available on PC. I don't see them making it available on Series X/S, and so there's still some degree of console warsery going on. I would say Microsoft made a very, I don't want to say good showing because the presentation was fucking miserable. But made a showing of, we have content coming to Xbox that is coming to Xbox, period. That is where it is going. PC as well. That is,
I mean, gone to the days where you see games on only one platform, just because, of course, these games cost so much money to make at this point, but also the addressable audience is a lot bigger, and so gating any game to only, let's just say, the user base of one particular console, that's going to max out at maybe 150 million or something like that, max.
Which is still a lot.
Max. Yeah, which is a lot. But I mean, for these games to really reach, but that's the outlier, and
right.
And you're going to get, of course, of the entire user base of any console, only a certain percentage of that user base is going to buy your game. So you're just capping yourself needlessly.
Now for third-party stuff, I still see the value in having first-party games where you say, they are staying here. They are our games for our system. Yeah. Because that creates a need for people to own your system. You can say, well, but if you put them on Steam, people can play them there too. Yeah, but you have to give Steam a cut. Mm-hmm. Now, is Microsoft paying the same cut on Steam as other publishers are? I can't say definitively they aren't, but I'm going to guess they probably aren't.
Yeah, they probably have a pretty sweetheart deal.
Yeah, and similar with the PlayStation stuff on Steam. If I'm Valve, yeah, I'm giving them as much of a deal as I can that doesn't get me sued later by somebody else. There's probably some degree of like, you have to be careful you don't do something stupid and get yourself sued. But like largely speaking, like the console war idea, like Nintendo won this console war with respect to what their investors care about when Mario Kart 8 Deluxe sold 61.97 million units. A game that already existed.
Oh, sure. But that's the thing. I mean, the metrics for the winning, a lot of the time were people focused on install base, right? Like that's just, well, who sold the most, right? And the Switch has got a shot at selling the most that anything has ever sold. So, yeah, I can understand how people get to this notion that they didn't forget, whether it was against the PS4 or against the PS5 or whatever. It's forever, right? They've won it against everything. Presume. I mean, they're coming up against the US PS2 install base is in sight now. They're within a few million of that, and then the global, for the DS and PS2 after that. I mean, it's so I understand how you get there, but I mean, install base has never been everything. It must be said, for instance, it's like with the Xbox and GameCube, who both were, pitiful runners up to PS2 in the grand scheme of things, of course. But they sold roughly similar amount of units.
Yeah, around 20-ish million units.
Xbox did that at a massive cost. They sold so many things at a loss. They paid so much for games to be on Xbox because they were just entering in. Whereas Nintendo, it wasn't a great time for them, but because they actually, were never going to price the hardware, at some steep loss and all that kind of stuff. Like it probably actually generated, it's still modest, but far better, revenues for them than Xbox did for Microsoft, because they weren't trying to make money in that particular generation. They were trying to get a foothold in the market, which they did, for however kind of modest it seemed at the time. It was a launch pad to bigger things with 360. So, they achieved their objectives, even as, if you're looking at it in terms of the install base size, and certainly in terms of how much profit, really how big the losses would have been for the division at that time. It was, compared to the kind of money that Sony was making, it was absolutely miserable. And yet still, they were making progress, towards their actual objective at that time. I think it's harder at this point to see what objective or they're pursuing or what progress they're making towards it, to be honest. But that's the point, is that there's always different metrics for success, right? And it's like, well, with Switch, I mean, it might be taking down all these records, but it's the one Nintendo hardware line. Let us not forget that Wii and DS both sold over 100 million units worldwide when they existed at the same time. So that is pretty difficult to compete with from Nintendo's past. So a lot, but on the other hand, I mean, the profits that they've made in the past several years, even, obviously if you look at it in nominal terms, it absolutely dwarfs what they've made before. But even in real terms, it's still a big increase. The profitability that Nintendo is achieving now is something that, frankly, with the development points that John made about the scale of the costs involved for the people that are making the so-called AAA games on PS5 and all that, the kind of profitability that Nintendo has achieved is almost unthinkable, for big parts of the rest of the industry. So is that not winning? I mean, it really does depend what metric you want to use, I guess, is the point of all that.
And I would use layoffs as a bad metric here, and I'm going to say something that's going to rub people the wrong way, and I'm sorry for this, but you have to keep in mind I'm speaking extemporaneously, as in the role of one of these companies, not for my own opinion. There is a very business-driven position that might say that layoffs are not fundamentally a failure. And they would use the term right sizing or something similar, aligning our needs to our resources or whatever, or resources to our needs, whatever term you want to use for that. And so saying that like Nintendo didn't win the console or won the console wars because they haven't had to do layoffs feels like a very bass-ackwards way of trying to justify making the statement that they won the console wars. Like you could have a situation where a console sells absolute fucking gangbusters, is a wild success, makes billions of dollars on the license to sell software, which Nintendo undoubtedly has. They've sold 1.2 billion units of Switch software at this point. But still engages in layoffs despite having a commanding market position. You would still say if you're going to use the term console wars at all, you might still say that platform would have won them, even though they engaged in layoffs, because the layoffs aren't necessarily a match. Like the console war concept is largely a market position thing. Where is your company with respect to its competitors, and how is it able to swing its business stick around in order to get the best possible outcome for its company because of its market position? Like the concern with the Sega versus Nintendo stuff of the Super Nintendo Genesis era wasn't just like, well, we can't lose to those fuckfaces over at Sega. They're goddamn idiots, which is true. It was largely about controlling the market position, making sure that you have the best negotiating position with software providers for your system, making sure that you're able to command the best rights fees for access to your platform, making sure that you're getting the best version of product, making sure that you're getting the product first or exclusively, that you're getting the good Castlevanias and Sega's getting the ones with Tall Frankenstein. Like, all of that stuff is what the console war was really about, that you're associated with the good product. None of that really directly factors into things like, do you need to do layoffs? It's more of a statement about, that's more of like what's the health of your business versus what's the health of your product.
I mean, if you're a publicly held company, you will have to do layoffs just to keep your shareholders happy.
Yeah, to some degree. Like,
yeah.
I mean, unless you do what Nintendo does, which seems to be extremely conservative in terms of employee growth, in terms of the number of employees they have.
Yeah, I mean, but also companies can also lay people off and just have it stay under the radar and never tell anybody about it.
But I mean, the other thing is, though, that their holding position is still very much leveraged by the Yamauchi family. Mm-hmm. And so they may not have to be as open about some of this stuff. They may be able to kind of like, to talk about, or they don't have to be as driven by the avarice of shareholders.
Yeah, and they also don't acquire companies like these other companies do either, really.
No. A lot of the layoffs that Microsoft did were layoffs from the acquisition.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean,
not
people
all
need to understand that as these companies acquire other companies, there are positions where you have two people doing the same thing, so you lay people off. And then also, it's also an opportunity for the acquiring company to say, yeah, we don't necessarily think that to get what we need out of this company, because you don't always buy a company for all of the company. Right. You may only buy it for, like, you may buy Capcom and say, I really don't care about a lot of those other franchises. I really just want Street Fighter. So the Resident Evil team, I'm just going to lay them off.
Right.
For example.
It's become our go-to example of Disney and the Spruce Goose and the Queen Mary. Like, they desperately did not want those things, but to get that land, to get the Disneyland hotel, they had to literally buy the Spruce Goose. The first person ever forced to buy that fucking godforsaken plane. Mm-hmm. And yeah, like, they spent years going, how the fuck do we get rid of this thing? Because they couldn't just burn it. They couldn't lay it off. It's a fucking airplane. So there is a certain amount of just like, when you acquire things for a reason. You don't acquire things for if it's a small, this goes back to when we talked about, Embracer, like why Embracer's strategy of we want to be, we're setting ourselves up to be acquired was completely ass backwards. Because when you want to get acquired, you get smaller. You get more focused. You get more laser focused on the things that you provide value in, or that you can provide competitive advantage, or that make you distinct. And you cut all the other chaff, because that's not what the company acquiring you is interested in. They're acquired in the thing you do better than anybody else, or at least better than they do it presently, and significantly better to such a degree that it would be better for them to just acquire you than try to develop that homegrown. Like, you really are focused on maximizing the places where you provide competitive advantage and minimizing literally everything else. And so when Microsoft went and did all these acquisitions, and extremely expensive acquisitions, like, I mean, Activision Blizzard King obviously was massively expensive, but they had been on a shopping spree for a while. They acquired a lot of HR teams that they're not going to need, because guess who doesn't get to set their own HR policy anymore? These companies. And if you're not setting your own HR policy, you don't need the HR policy guy, because you already got those. Microsoft has plenty of HR policy people, I assure you. No matter what country that the company they acquired was in. That's the other part. Like, if you're already a multinational corporation at a scale that literally no other company on earth has ever been in the history of the world, you already have subject matter experts in every possible HR law that could possibly exist. Every possible compliance, every possible tax rule, every e-commerce rule, every government, like all the government lobbyist positions. You've got them all. And in Activision's case, they were a major multinational corporation that had all those things. And so while this doesn't necessarily justify the layoffs, it is an unavoidable outcome as a consequence of such a major acquisition, because Activision definitely had lobbyists. They definitely had internal attorneys who are responsible for keeping track of what the current state of the law is in every country. They had HR experts in many countries, in many times probably multiple groups, depending on what the specific sub-polity of that country is and the governing policy there, if that country has a federalist structure like the U.S. does. And so you have all these things that you don't need anymore, because Microsoft definitely fucking has those. And they're almost certain. I can tell you right now, their HR is definitely better than Activision Blizzard's.
Yeah.
You know how I know that? Because go look at why Microsoft was able to buy Activision Blizzard.
Yeah. But also too, you talk a lot about, with Microsoft, talking about Tango Gameworks. And, I thought about that, and it could very well, people are always saying, why did they cut them loose? Why did they lay everybody off? And I think it probably comes down to the fact where Microsoft might have looked at it and said, we have all these people employed. We could probably get games like this without employing all these people.
Yes. Yo, that's definitely what it
we
comes
could partner
down to.
with somebody who makes games like this. We don't need to have these people on our payroll. And sometimes it's as simple as that.
That's why Nintendo never bought companies like Arzest and HAL. They didn't need to. Or Intelligent Systems. Like, the relationship is good. They have the contracts. They get the games they want. Nintendo has the ownership stakes to make sure that you don't have fucking Fire Emblem show up on a PlayStation. And that essentially they're able to keep themselves safe enough and keep their brand safe enough that they feel confident they'll be able to find the partners to make these products, and that the partnerships they have aren't going anywhere. And we talked about it. When Nintendo buys a company, it's largely a defensive move. Mm-hmm. That's why they bought Next Level. That's why it seems like they bought, I can't remember what the name of the company was, the one they just bought in Miami.
Sure.
Like, the nearest I can tell, Nintendo paid almost nothing in this deal.
Oh, well, I'd be very surprised if it wasn't a substantial bargain in that case. Because, one thing we should remember, obviously this has been a boon to the Nintendo's profits of late, but, with the yen losing value really quite drastically,
immensely
in recent times, like it's almost like sterling is like nearly 200 yen now. That's just like, I've never seen it that high, and sterling has gone down a lot relative to the dollar over the past so many years, so I imagine it's really historic highs for the dollar. But of course, while that's great for Nintendo's earnings from the point of view that they bring in so much of their revenue from America because it's the world's biggest economy, and then that's worth more when they bring it back into Japan, of course it means it's more expensive to run things in America, like Retro, like this new acquisition in Miami, as you mentioned. So I can only imagine that they are acquiring it for a pittance because it will cost a fair bit to run.
I read the balance statement sheets that came out from this thing, and I don't believe what I saw. But let's put it this way. I believe every member of RFN may have been able to scrounge together the money necessary to make this purchase.
But I mean,
not collectively, independently.
The real point of all of this for me is that Nintendo, if they won the console wars and all, if you want to make that argument, and this is somewhat contradictory, I know, but they won it by opting out of it. That's the point. They did not engage in the shit that the other companies were doing by being impossibly large and pursuing, higher and higher development costs and, these visual standards and, trying to outdo each other on, these huge exclusives or buying up other companies to make them make exclusives and all that. They managed to just they started doing this obviously a long time ago now with Wii and DS, but really, it's still, they've almost seemed like they've taken that to a whole other level of like perfection now, where they've just like, all this stuff, this sort of impossible race that only makes it harder to make the kind of profits that you want to make in this industry. We could just opt out of that and carve out our own space where actually the numbers add up a lot more, where you can sell millions and millions of units of games that don't take prohibitive amount of money to make in the first place. When you think about things like, the numbers that Luigi's Mansion 3 has sold, that Super Mario Party has sold, as well as increasing the sales of the really big hitters like Mario Kart 8 and the Super Mario games and so forth. It's that is the way in which they've truly won, is just being able to opt out and fight on their own battleground, which is so much more fruitful in so many ways. And it has to be, because they're not a stupidly massive conglomerate like those like Sony and Microsoft are, right? So that isn't an option. That's not an arms race they can win.
You know who did very well in World War I? Switzerland. They did great. You know why? Because they didn't have to do a goddamn thing. They just sat there and let it happen. Everybody else had a bad time. They're like, boy, sure he's getting rowdy next door. The Nintendo went with the boy, it sure is getting rowdy next door approach, where they didn't have to go through this period, like around, I'd say like 2014, when both Sony and Microsoft were engaging in acquisitions or these like long-term partnership deals to try to make sure they had a content war chest, because content was everything. Content was the whole idea, and they were trying to drive exclusives. And then spent billions, and in Microsoft's case, I would tens of billions of dollars to build these things up. And now they're like, well, honestly, is that really the right play? No. I mean, John, you mentioned Tego GameWorks. Tego GameWorks isn't even that old as a company. They're around for 6 years?
Yeah.
And Microsoft bought them a few years into that, I believe. And then because they wanted to have, we have to have a Japanese studio. We don't have a Japanese studio. We need to have a Japanese studio. We're a major console player. We need a Japanese studio. And then they didn't. And they're like, actually, no, we can just get Capcom to port all their games, except for this Marvel vs. Capcom collection, to our system, and we'll be good to go. We don't need this crap. And it is the unfortunate reality of making business decisions at 10,000 feet. So I don't know what the right way to delineate what a console war even is in this period. Like, I do think they definitely forced, their actions have definitely forced responses from Microsoft and Sony. I think part of the reason Microsoft keeps boy, I sure would love to know what a portable Xbox would be like, is because the games division's executives are probably hearing from their bosses at Microsoft HQ, like, why does your division suck? We just spent $60 billion. What's going on over there? And they're like, why is the Switch being successful? And they're like, well, I mean, we might do a handheld too. There's almost a certain amount of whenever we hear Microsoft games executives, specifically Phil Spencer, talk about how cool it would be to have a portable Xbox, all I can hear in the back of my head is, motherfucker, that's your call. You can just say we're going to make a portable Xbox. You don't have to try to wish cast it into existence. And then you have to think well, who's the audience for that statement? Is it the rabid Xbox fan base? No, because right now they don't exist. It's his bosses who look at Switch and go, that thing fucking makes money hand over fist. Why don't we? Like, there is a certain amount of, like, they have had to project their actions backwards. Sony has that weird Portal thing because they got out of the handheld space because they thought it wasn't lucrative anymore. They felt like it had been drained by mobile. Like, the reason there's no Vita the reason there's no Vita successor is, one, they mismanaged the Vita because Sony can't manage too many hardware lines at one time. We've already seen that. We're seeing that now with the VR headset 2, which actually I think is a more damning statement than anything, is the current condition of the Sony. What's their VR platform called?
PSVR 2.
PSVR 2, yeah. The current state of PSVR 2, I think, is a more damning statement about Sony's place in this console war cycle. But also because they felt like if they still felt there was meat on the bone, they would have tried to solve it. But they didn't. And they likely felt like, well, portable gaming's been taken over by mobile. Or will be. There's nothing there. I mean, I remember us talking about this during the DS's. You cannot find a DS in stores time in Japan. We're like, well, the mobile's going to erode the mobile space. And then Nintendo releases a system that is largely centric on its mobileness while also being a console and may well sell more consoles than literally any system in history. So, like, yeah, I'm sure that the Portal is at least in some degree a response to that. I'm like, we have to make it clear that we care about portability and stuff like that. But we're doing it in the context of streaming because that's what we have. We don't have the capacity, the technology, or the ability to produce product for a brand new system. So what can we do? What can we do to prove that? So we have something on the market to go, look, it looks like a Switch. So I would say their philosophy has won a debate. I don't know. I would say it's won a war, which feels very pedantic and like I'm trying to end a debate club presentation. But I usually just straight up did appeals to emotion and did all the things you're not supposed to do.
That's winning moves not to play, James. I think you know that's the
the winning move was to break every single rule of debate. It always is. I hate to break that to you, but people are stupid and they want you to do stupid things to appeal to their stupidity.
Or just go full Shatner, and the winning move is to cheat.
Yeah, exactly. It was, yes. Don't do ad hominem attacks. Okay, but he's an idiot. And people remember, it was that guy and the idiot. Yeah. I'm sorry how depressing that is for you, but it's reality. I never called anybody an idiot. I thought about it. In some cases, it was true, but no. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's such a. I think ultimately what we're all saying is that the console war term doesn't exist in the sense that it existed when the term was being used.
It's an anachronism.
Yeah, they've definitely won the marketing war. Like their marketing campaign for Switch was very good.
It's more brand wars at this point.
Yeah, I would say the health of their brand is probably as high as it's been since the early 90s.
Yeah.
Like you think about where like the Mario movie's bad. It just is. It's a bad movie. But like it's definitely a function of a campaign to increase the value of the Mario brand. The fact that there's now Mario theme parks is a thing that would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. The amount of Mario merch I see on store shelves lately has been stultifying. Like to the point where it's like there is at my Target, there is an entire in the game section, there is an entire half aisle. So these are like aisles that are half length and half height rather than the full height aisles that are a full length. There is an entire one of those that's just Mario merch. That's the only thing on it. So it's like 16 feet long. And
I mean, you see all of these
high.
companies trying to extend their brands. I mean, with everything that Nintendo's doing with the theme parks, but
Sony they're being successful. That's the ticket.
Sony with The Last of Us TV series, Gran Turismo movie, Xbox with the credit card.
The credit card, the refrigerator. But exactly stuff like the Halo, But that's
TV
stuck
show.
on Paramount Plus where no one can see it.
Yeah, But you see, I mean, that's the thing though. It's not really necessarily like you've seen these media properties. They've gone beyond consoles, right?
Are you suggesting they are now transmedia properties?
I don't even know if they're I don't even know if I would call them that anymore. They're more just media properties because you could know what The Last of Us is, but not have a clue what PlayStation is. But you've been on HBO and you said, "Hey, this looks pretty cool. It's a new zombie show."
Fallout has had a lot of success.
Exactly. Like there's just a lot of this, like the concept of these properties being tied to video games or consoles is slowly over time being eroded.
I think Nintendo is probably going to keep it more tightly bound to that because that is their core business.
Yes,
but,
it is.
Yeah,
for
but
sure.
like Sony doesn't. Gaming isn't Sony's core business. Sony's core business is Shrug. Like they've got lots of divisions that are largely independent of one another. You know, they've got divisions that make TVs and media players, and they've got a hi-fi division. They've got a music label. I think they've got 2 music labels. They've got 2 anime labels.
They still got the Walkman out there, James.
They do. They've got a company that makes bad movies and pisses off North Korea. They've got a video games division. They're all over the map. Nintendo, their core business is still their video games business, so everything needs to feed back to that.
Yep.
But yeah, like Mario as a concept, as a thing, as a entity, they're quite content to have it be out there in ways that comports with their vision for it. Like I think that's the other thing. Like you're never going to see a Sonic movie style Mario. Well, no, we did, and it was fucking terrible. You're never going to see another one of those because it doesn't comport with the vision. Like they're being very clear eyed on what they want the vision of their brand to be. Yeah, I mean it's the Disneyfication. Like the idea that Disney makes a movie, but they make a movie knowing that it can do X, Y, and Z beyond being a movie. And that's important. Like that's important to maintaining the viability of the media property. Now, in the Disney case, they want to put out a new movie every year, or a new animated film every year, and let it run its media cycle, and then it kind of falls into thing we can reheat for purposes of merchandising and attractions and other stuff. Nintendo obviously can't do that. They can't put out a Mario product every year. It just isn't a mainline Mario product. Mainline Mario product every year. It's just not viable. But that's where the diversification actually gives them an advantage. Because, okay, we're not going to put out a mainline Mario game this year, but we are going to put out a movie. We are going to open a fucking theme park. I don't know if the Orlando one's opened yet. I know, John, you went to the Los Angeles one.
Yep. I don't think the one in Orlando's open yet.
No. I was looking to go when I was out that way, but literally it's impossible to get from Anaheim to Los Angeles. There is no public transit, despite the fact it's like not that far away. You may as well need to get on another goddamn airplane and fly from the one airport to the other. But it is a thing that they are doing. Like it's in Japan as well. They got the Japan resort as well. It's a process of building out the value of their brands, and they're winning at business, not at console warring. Now, if the Switch's successor comes out and it's a complete flatliner, which I don't think it will be, but if it does, a lot of those other business opportunities might go away. Like we don't really talk about diversification keeps them safe if they have a bad console cycle. But if they go out of sight, out of mind, does it actually diminish their ability to be the target of attention for these other opportunities? And right now, I don't know. But in the context of this Direct, it showed that the Switch is still a viable... I mean, I would say the takeaway from this Direct is the Switch is still a viable platform for at least the next few months. Is it going to be like the heydays where we were getting a heavy hitter every couple months? No. That time has come and gone. But there's still stuff coming out that's interesting. And a Hobbit life simulator for some reason. But there is interesting stuff coming out as well that is maybe experimental or different or maybe not as big its scope, or it's a remake, but it's it's out there. It's a platform that third parties are still supporting. It was a very third-party heavy direct. Major third parties are still supporting. And for Nintendo, getting support for major third parties late in a console's lifecycle is definitely a fucking win, because that has not been a guarantee for a long-ass time. What, Super Nintendo? Think about the GameCube. It was largely dropped.
Even something as popular as DS had been. It kind of, you had a bit of a flight from, from third parties as the kind of seemingly the bite of piracy. With R4 cartridges and all that, and that also then and as you already mentioned, the projection of what mobile gaming was going to do to dedicated portables, running then into the next generation for the 3DS, and that kind of hurt how robust the third-party stuff was at the beginning of that, because it seemed like, there was a number of announcements and things when the 3DS was first revealed that then was walked back, and so I think it's absolutely right to mention just how kind of unusual that this is, and again you could look at the similar thing with how successful Wii was, and yet never entirely embraced by certain sectors of the the kind of third party partners that you'd seen in other generations, and certainly at the end it was not replete with a lot of appealing offerings from them. So I do think obviously there's limitations with the tech being as old as it is now on Switch and all that, but they seem to be coping kind of remarkably well. When you look at the measure of how many sort of releases there's still going to be. For what we now is publicly acknowledged to be, this kind of twilight period. So definitely in that sense, it was more than I was expecting. Not way out of bounds, but certainly on the upper end.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I think that's it.
All right.
Go to bed.
That's a podcast. All right. So this is a long episode. You're probably hearing it early. It probably is a little bit of a rough edit because we really didn't. We just do it together. But hey, that was their direct for June. It's not an E3, but it's the closest thing we have now, I guess. God help us. Thanks everybody for listening. We have music, but first, emails. Send emails. Send them. It's rfn at NintendoWorldReport.com. That's rfn at NintendoWorldReport.com. rfn at NintendoWorldReport.com. Say it 3 times. That's the trick in radio media advertising, and this is kind of like radio, I guess. Greg, music.
Well, you had a particular suggestion that I thought was a good idea, considering to bring it all the way back to the beginning. The most sort of prominent discussion item, the one that you felt was the most important to headline the whole direct.
Yes. So this is. I mentioned that the Ace Attorney Investigations games, Edgeworth has his own somewhat younger female assistant that drives him absolutely insane with her peppy attitude and disrespect for literally everything and everyone. In his case, it's a thief rather than just a spirit channeling idiot. I say that with great affection for Maya's character, but she is very dumb. This is Kay Faraday. She is the Yatagarasu, which is this legendary thief, or she is the heir to the title. And she regularly involves herself in Edgeworth's investigations, largely because, LOL, it sounds like fun. I don't know. She's marginally helpful, but sometimes incredibly frustrating. And as a consequence, this is one of those, like, we've localized a game to be California when it's clearly Japan. And we have this very inspired by Japanese folklore style thief in the form of a teenage girl. And so this is actually her theme, called The Great Thief of Truth. This is specifically from one of the orchestral arrangements they did of the Ace Attorney Investigations games. I believe this is the one that they were sourcing on in the direct video, but I'm not 100% sure because I think there was a second one that was done later. But The instrumentation is extremely Japanese, as is a lot of the music in it, although it does have some quick pivots in there. The Ace Attorney Investigations 2 broadly, and 1, but 2 in particular, have some real fucking banger tunes. Like some real good stuff. I don't think Kay's theme is particularly good. It's fine. But this version of it, with all the instrumentation, is really good. They really went all out on this one. I will say the same album has a extended song that's played almost entirely on pipe organ, on a real one. Somebody had way too much budget when they made this special edition orchestral arrangement. So yeah, that's it, and that will do it for us this week. Bye, everybody.
Later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.